Good afternoon, Salotine Edladot. Good morning, actually, boy. Altane. Way ahead of time, Aslala Dunzinek. Egant and either see about 5 o'clock. Gabin done, but Edladot. Good morning, Salotine Dunzinek no barrel yon leoja. TCU Place, Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. Yours in all huntati donat liansan dun zinek yanse no haba dena si bak IS2 and dahu ansi ganets a daisy danu yansan jan a denayati podcast and then and not the Robert Marasti no all huntata das and dena how they so back and forth in between at yanets a daisy a co-answer doing zinek so join me Cheryl Hill and not you all in between the residential school Ile-a-Crosse survivors gathering at doing zinek so yans no babab iOS theater that iganets a DSC right here TCU Place. I believe anybody or maybe registered auto but no habaho aunt ala or it's not a bad thing her so Yazanobak iOS tia doing zinik a 9 o'clock what's in registration no 9 o'clock what's in opening prayer hasa opening prayer Emile Janvichu Antoinette Lafleur by Tiada Haratune and then 9:20 what's in opening remarks Dwayne Favell Ile-a-la-Crosse Survivors Committee it's President Glenn McCollum Métis Nation president Vice President Michelle Leclerc the and then Chief Ali Bear Vice Chief Ali Bear FSIN opening remarks as on doing zinige and then right after that break Chu or no mental health keynote Brenda Reynolds held from for about an hour 9:45 it's in 10:45 it's in and then a break 15 minutes legal review henni ladder Waddell Phillips bahal at iga si hunt at that isilu but 11 was in 12 o'clock what's in and then buffet lunch doing zineke and then buses to and from hotels breakout sessions as on doing zineke trauma and healing basu with Melanie Wozniak, Ted Flett, Tina Gardner, and Maureen Belanger. Language and culture, Vince Henneque, Julius Parku, Survivor Circle, Chuck McCollum, a legal overview, Waddell Phillips. So that the lawsuit holding you see, Ryan Shackleton, a history, unmarked burials. And then Duna afternoon 2 o'clock with the keynote speaker as an independent special interlocutor and missing children unmarked burials wellness break questions and sharing time at the 4 o'clock this afternoon. So same thing abine breakfast and again all weekend Hassan all weekend so I ganino babag ay that is from for all today doing zineke and of course dene didit ala denu and now dene sanad day sanja dene sanad day so it's very good to see dene sanad yes tiken aster ha doing zineke as much as I can yeah ko on this but yeah come on down at larot yes it's in chords yeah I gotta get some sound here sound الكاستيها التدوت ايها so تلتو بونيفيا and that's one thing I forgot هطلع سيا chord the hanas nilu no but we got it all figured out that you see as a data you gotta improvise so ko on this on doing zineke salotine but I believe afternoon or the gabiuto there's gonna be a market, indigenous market, their Métis conference, survivors gathering, no see, Métis Nation, I ni I Métis Nation dance and neon the like on a lawsuit holding a new lawsuit claim file al yani see 2005 but I file al it wasn't going anywhere, so new one holding. And so very good to see. Yeah, doing over the next 3 days. That he has seen, and that's a day has see. No, babagay is too. Then I tidut out. You know, one of the things that the residential schools, boarding schools that you can deni see no hayatia, but adut diondala. Do design like less than what it should be, or colonization base. So sinnes and doing zineg no al hitao say a tie but oris out and a darit iha and very good nezu. Do a ganain de cole a sunai deo then a san then a darit out. So good to see, must see. And make sure no ha TV get on sade, no phone get brut arf ilde. No ha TV get YouTube get sade then a podcast. There they all day, maybe no coince who say they. You don't have to blast MBC radio. And there then a podcast, do tliste TV, yeah, doing zinege dahu asi danus ja. Northwest so it's in then they not day boy, Jesh Chu, bunch La La Shu, Turner Lake, Ile-a-Crosse, boy, then it's probably about 200 people here. But shortly after, I'm gonna get Robert Marasti, Chetiondi, but and now they do so it's gonna be back and forth English, Cree, and Dene all day, and of course, anytime I'm gonna put it over to the other screen. See, so I'm gonna get set up here. I gotta hook up sound, so I'll be back in a little bit. Alrighty, once again, doon zinige. Wesley here. Good morning. Salutine. Thompson, Manitoba. Irene and David. Wesley, Patricia Yassi. So Atlunja say that's a diazang this morning. Then I done daily registration, 9 o'clock on Bonidio. You know, one of these things, Indian times at Dionala. Indian times. Oh, that's a Delsa. I'm actually, I'll be right back here. So, Salatina, you'll be able to see the video. I'll give you sound here in a bit. Just about cable, you can hear me good, but you can see the live stream there. You'll be able to watch it at Dunzinike. Good morning, Amelia. So, right now, Sidahi, you'll be able to hear my sound. But I MCC, Dwayne Favel Chu, a Maureen Belanger, a MC Heliasa. Oh, they lost camera here. Boku. Boku eden hayasa. So just a heads up here, we'll have sound here in about 1 minute. 1 minute. Give me a minute here.
But this morning is going to be really busy. It's going to be packed, and everybody is going to be here all morning for the presentations. Hopefully everybody's checked in. I know it was quite a little kerfuffle there with the check-ins, but if anybody has any issues, talk to Philip. Where's Philip? He's hiding now. I'm just kidding. Talk to Philip, Jordan, or myself. We'll try and help you out the best we can.
Alrighty. You got sound good?
Am I missing anything?
How's the sound coming through?
Washrooms are, as soon as you leave here, the washrooms are in that corner. Those of you that have mobility issues that are unable to come up and down the stairs, there's elevators available. And this room can hold, Jordan, 390 people. 390 people, that's how many, obviously if every seat's taken, that's how many we have here right now. So for the banquet tonight, I don't know how we're gonna do this, the survivors, if you can just, the ones that are here, come. I know we'd like to extend, you know how it is us, I was gonna say half-breed people, but I forgot. You know how we like to bring family, right? I don't know how to say it, but you can't bring your family. We're just so packed to the gills that we weren't expecting this. So those of you that are here, please come to the banquet. We'll try and accommodate everyone as best as we can. The mental health staff, can you come to the front here so you can be easily identifiable? They all have these beautiful orange and blue lanyards, and it says mental health support. Liz DeRocher, Terry Hansen Gardner, Mautita Gipini Poik Katawapm Goyik. So if you can come to the front, all the mental health supports, so people can identify and see who you are. So if they need you, they'll know who to look for. I'm not going to give names because... So here's our, we have 22 mental health supports here. And Ted Flett, Melanie, Tina Gardner, are you in the room? If you want to come forward too, I mean, we're doing a presentation, but I'm sure nobody's going to turn anyone away here. So this is the awesome team that M&S has given to us for this function, mental health supports here. These lovely people here, they have the special name tags. Give a wave. We have two more coming here, Melanie and Tina and Ted Flett. These are the people that are going to be here for your supports anytime, any place that you need them. We're going to be stressing the importance of the mental health supports, because what's going to happen is you might be triggered at the gathering and you might take it home. With that, we're going to have a whole bunch of different phone numbers and people you can connect with. We don't want you to suffer alone anymore. Okay, Dwayne, what are you doing down there? You're not a mental health worker. Okay, with that, okay.
Okay, so we'll begin our ceremony the way we always do as Indigenous people. So I'm going to call on Anne Lafleur from Beauval and Emile Janvier from La Loche to give us an opening prayer.
Ladies first. Good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be invited to this function. Lots of relatives and friends. So I'll begin my prayer. Please stand.
Testing.
Creator, who dwells in the sky, lead us to a path of peace and understanding. Let us all live as brothers and sisters. Let our eyes be open to all the blessings you have given us. Our lives are so short here, walking upon Mother Earth's surface. Creator, hear us as we cry out to you for your strength and your wisdom every day. We thank you for the 4 directions, the 4 winds. In each of these 4 directions, you have provided for us a grandfather to look upon us in our journey through life. We thank you especially for having provided Mother Earth for us, by which we get food and medicines for our everyday consumption. Make us wise so that we may know the things you have taught your children, the lessons you have written in every leaf and in every rock. Make us strong, not to be superior to our brothers and sisters, but to fight our greatest enemy, ourselves. Creator, bless us and all our families so that we may begin to understand our culture and traditions, and that before you, we are all equal. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Beautiful day to gather. I'm going to ask the Creator that we have healthy discussions and that we don't hurt one another with our actions or our words. And that one more thing is that we have to educate our children of what we went through to get an education, the pain, the loneliness. So today I'm going to ask the Creator in my language to bless us. Darya du zinega jointui daily. No homes nihu, no hajala nihu, no hayatiu. Excuse me. No hayatiu a yahoo yesa, no hadons nihu, nessa school I did. No health of no the with Achale. Sadness with no, I don't need to think. No sending need Darya mercy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne, and thank you very much for an opening prayer.
Okay, so we had our opening prayers. I guess what we should be doing is acknowledging the land that we are in. We are in Treaty 6 territory and the land of the home of the Métis. What? We're gonna move right on with our program here because we have a lot of stuff to cover. And like Elder Emile Janvier said, our words and our actions, we are carrying a lot of pain and suffering from years gone by. And my understanding is this is the first time that we are all gathering here at the Ile-a-Crosse boarding school. It's the first time that we're coming together. I mean, we met when we went to meet the Pope in Alberta there, but gathering like this and being given the opportunity to talk, we need to be, let's begin our healing journey together and let's be respectful. And like I said, you have a lot of supports here. There's another, let me quickly tell you guys about another reminder to announce the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation is on site today for statement gathering activities. There's a table set up in the front area there, but they're over there. Yeah, and Jordan's pointing over there. Wow, she's using a finger and not her lips. Anyways, they have a room set up The people in Ile-a-Crosse had that chance to experience it where they're doing a documentary. Or no, that's a different one. There's a whole bunch of different things. I'm confused. Anyways, we have a quiet room set up where you can go and talk to these people, and they're starting to gather information. Whatever you feel comfortable in sharing, we are here for that. Okay? Boy, I can't remember what I was going to say next. Do you remember? No, you're not in my head. Oh, I acknowledged the mental health support. I almost forgot. The Ile-a-Crosse Friendship Center sent 4 of their people here too, so we need to acknowledge them. And just on that note, those of you that are from Ile-a-Crosse, please utilize the after-hours phone line. We are there. Anytime, any place, you can reach one of us. There's Tina Gardner, Melanie, myself, and Ted Flett. That service is available. So if you're feeling, when you go home from here, if you're feeling sad and lonely, or in my case, if you want a bingo partner, you can call me. Okay, let's get on with the program. Now we'd like to invite up, is that where we're at, Dwayne? Okay. We're going to invite up opening prayer. Opening remarks. I guess the first person on my program happens to be standing right here. So we'll give him the microphone. Dwayne Fable comes from Ile-a-Crosse. He's the mayor in Ile-a-Crosse and sometimes acts as Alphonse. And he also sits on the Survivors Committee. So we're going to be hearing from him first.
Okay, merci, Maureen. Thank you very much. So on behalf of the Residential School Committee, I'm really proud to say welcome to all the survivors from the Ile-a-Crosse residential school system. This is truly a very historic moment to Anos. It's historic in a sense that this is the first time that we've called all the Ile-a-Crosse residential school survivors under one roof. And I know the emotions are a bit of a roller coaster when we see one another for the first time. A lot of you probably haven't seen each other since you left that school. And the emotions and the pain, might play within us in a way that we might not be able to handle at certain points. Because it's so nice to see all the people from Ile-a-Crosse and from the different communities coming in from far away regions where you now live, to come and have this conversation and hopefully move towards a settlement, compensation, and move forward with truth and reconciliation. But I also have to say, and I'm very, very proud to say that we were only able to do this through the support of the Métis Nation of Saskatchewan. This event, I would assume, costs us between probably $750,000 to $1 million to bring everybody under the same room. But it's important because we've never done this. We've never given the survivors an opportunity to tell their truth, to have a conversation with other people that they spend time with in the Ile-a-Crosse residential school. So I just want to say thank you very much from the heart to the Métis Nation of Saskatchewan, our President Glenn McCallum, our Vice President Leclerc, and all the executive and all the Métis Nation of Saskatchewan. Let's give them one more nice round of applause. Stand up, Glenn. Stand up, yeah. So merci, yeah. And I also want to commend the Residential School Committee. This committee was put together in the late 1990s. And I believe my late uncle, Don Fable, was a huge part of it all the way through the process. There's a lot of people on this committee over the years, and I think they need to be acknowledged and recognized. and a lot of them have passed on. They died fighting for recognition for the Ile-a-Crosse Residential School. So I want all my committee members, with chair, the chair of the residential school, and all the committee members, just to stand up to be acknowledged that, you know, we continue to struggle and fight for recognition. So I'll get all the committee members to stand up. Yeah, so thank you very much. And then I just want to say that, you know, have some good conversations, have some visits. You truly deserve to interact and share with one another in a good way. And I think, you know, this for me is really the beginning of our healing journey as survivors of the Ile-a-Crosse Residential School. I believe that coming together in this way will truly help and support all our communities that struggle so hard. There's so many difficulties in our communities, from drugs and addictions. And we all know that, you know, that this is a part of the Ile-a-Crosse Residential School legacy. And there's no way we can deny that. So for the future of our communities, our kids and our grandkids, it's important that we begin the path to healing and to truth and reconciliation. So merci, thank you very much.
Thank you for that wonderful opening there, Dwayne. And next up, we have on the agenda, we have President Glenn McCallum from the Métis Nation of Saskatchewan, who will come and send greetings, and let's give him a round of applause.
Good morning, everyone. Mi osin lembat tuan kapamos kahtian anus kagi sipa agi pamgi hugian mi chat ni chiwaganak igogi stogu chiwaganuag utea chigan somgagi siga. We'll start in a good way, pana kaitu ichik prayer. It was in a good way minatigi machita mi chat nagatuya ko say Uwiwa tagita chik Ile-a-Crosse school gagituti chik residential school. My mom, it was my wife's mom. Ikaw managay chika tiga na sko guys kamusita no kitihina ni tansa sko gi swisakti ya kagiswa tagigaw chika isinuak young kids at that time. So what I'd like to do this morning to remember the people that have gone to that residential school is to be able to stand up at this time, Nipawik, and let's a moment of silence. Kamyana anak. Thank you. Mr. Henowitz, what I just said is I'll speak my language more than the English language, my second language. The reason being is that at the point of our lives, we're starting to make headway in regards to how governments work with us, especially the federal government. We've come a long ways in a very short period of time to be able to be where we're at today. And the reason I'm saying that is remembering those young children like my mother and my mother-in-law and my dad and your moms and dads, your sisters, your brothers, Kagiut ni gautsik from the home when they were taken away from the home. Ito tay chik in a foreign place. Kagi go insto ta kawa kaya simuin. They didn't understand the language. To be able to be in that place. Igutagaya chiki ko mawas ka ni. Igaskita ko, they were lonesome. Umama o papa sit nagatugutsik. Their moms and dads walking away from the school when they left them there. Ito si ami higut chiki ko gutay sinwa. Igaya simuit nesto and people talking to them in that residential school in a foreign language. Imagine how that felt as a young child. Mas kumitse togi piwi tamok. Iginoktiwap ma tsigumama o igaskita ko papa aste. Umusumo kumuao. Nima nagamam tini taman baba gamam tini magapun mama. Tansigi suwa tagita chik school gay to teachik. Mo chigi asta chik tawap ma chiku papa sumama. Not to be able to see their mom and dad. You know, we sit here, and if we look at our lives, the communities that we come from, and the dysfunction that's still happening with alcoholism, drug abuse, incarceration, suicides, and the list goes on. Because of the actions of the provincial and federal governments at the time didn't allow us to live our lives. There was a policy in place that you will be taken into an industrial school and to be able to learn another language, another lifestyle. You know, when I look at my own life, I've been abused myself, sexually, physically, abandoned, neglected, grew up with anger, jealousy, controlling factors. But there is such a thing as healing. You can overcome. But at the time that we were healing, nobody understood our identity, our culture, our values, and our language. And a lot of times, even when you're sitting in a meeting talking about reconciliation, to be able to speak your language and be respected in the language that you speak is not embraced. So for me, when we talk about reconciliation, I'm talking about me in regards to how I can reconcile for me. Tansin stukwani tastik, tansin DST tastik. Tansin agi piece of match and how I grew up within my family home of violence, alcohol violence. Mom and dad separated when I was only 10 years old. Being alone at 13. My dad was always angry, especially when he was drunk. But he was a good man. But to be able to be in that foreign place, to be able to be taught differently, and not in your home with your mom and dad, your family members, that is something that you cannot replace if you stay there for 10 to 15 years. As you can see in this room, a lot of times we don't even look at each other as friends or partners or relatives because it's hard. My brothers are now gone, a couple of brothers that I've lost recently, and my mother. It took a while. I was 45 years old before my mom told me she loved me. That's a long wait. And my dad never did, and he's gone. So when we look at our individual families, we look at ourselves in regards to reconciling with ourselves, to be able to have balance between our mind and our hearts. To be able to look in the past and embrace the past in regards to what has happened. Then we show emotion, we cry. Misha tong himaton. even my wife sitting here, gets to experience, in regards to the dysfunction that was created in my family, then she gets to experience it. And my kids being drunk, not taking care of business, not taking care of family. And to be able to change me, reconcile with myself in regards to where my brain is and where my heart is, and to be able to show that love that I should have for my wife and my own family. And a lot of us are going through that. The simplest things to say, I love you. I love you. I had a hell of a time saying it. Why? Because I didn't understand what love was. A lot of people ask you, what is love? Love is trust, respect, feeling, caring, tolerance, understanding, acceptance, and forgiveness. You know, for me to be able to trust me, respect me, and feel for me, it was a hard thing. It's a hard battle. And to be able to apply those 8 principles of healing to someone like my wife or my kids or my grandchildren. Okay, man. Even just the simplest things as holding hands with your own, the person that you care for. Ay man, it's hard. So we've got a lot of practicing to do. Communication, accommodating someone that we care for. To be able to show the appreciation that we have for them or the love that we have for them. You know, I bet you I wouldn't be able to speak the way that I'm speaking now if I wasn't healed. There is such a thing as healing. I used to cry a lot as a young boy and even as an adult, not knowing where to turn. But somebody showed me, my grandchildren, when my wife was working at the mine site, and I got to keep a child that was only 5 years old for a week. Later in life, I was taught how to feel, how to be able to care for somebody else, to take care of somebody else. In regards to who you are as individuals, even within my own family, I have a son, our son, doing drugs in Pine House right now. I have a child, a girl of mine, that hasn't gone to work because of drugs. Every one of us are being affected by what has happened many years ago. When they took away family structures, broke family structures, and they broke us. Our mums and dads, our Muslims and our kukums. And that's a terrible thing. And to be able to sit here and wait for governments to wake up to the fact that it's not on their shoulders anymore. The province or the federal government, they're going to fix the indigenous people. No. Much. That's on us. So as we begin to build good structures and governments with accountability and transparency, only then they can begin to open the door and to be able to give us the capacity that we need to be able to support our communities, our people that are suffering from drugs and alcohol and incarcerated. Every other day, we're facing suicide in this province, in our Métis communities and First Nations communities. And people keep talking about reconciliation. I've always said that reconciliation becomes a weasel word when people can stand and sit together and laugh and enjoy, and then they go home and do nothing. I'm telling governments now, and I've said that openly to the federal government, the opposition, the NDP, and this province. Regards to that, it's not on their shoulders. It's about time they start supporting Indigenous governments and programming. Our track record speaks for itself with regards to what we can do as a Métis nation, as you can see. That support needs to come to us and to our people to support programs on the land healing. You know, in my community of 99% of alcoholism where I come from, and I guarantee you a lot of you have come to my community to drink. What changed in that community to be able to be different today? We didn't expect the province to do anything or the federal government. We did it on our own. We took ownership of our lives and created a Recovery Lake program, which my brother started, Leonard McCallum. And he's gone now. That place is going to be renamed after him. But to be able to see the people, the smiles that we have now in our community, we still have drugs, we still have alcohol. But we've come a long ways. The Fifth Estate, you saw Pine House for what it was in regards to what was going on. But it has changed. And that's why the Métis Nation and the First Nations communities can change. But it can be on a volunteer basis. It has to be supported. When people talk about reconciliation, give the real capacity to the communities to be able to do their programs, because each community is different. Even the elders within our communities that hold sweats. I see my friend Donald here in front of me, my cousin, that does that. Does he ever get support and recognition from anyone? It's a struggle dealing with ourselves, dealing with our communities without the proper support that we should be getting. Namamitsin yan, nasutagani po yan. Igaskita yan, tagwiskin suyan, tagwiskin naman, matsun. I'm glad to be standing here that I've changed my life for the better. And to be able to say to my wife, Kisagi itin, I love you. And my kids. But again, the kids that we have will blame us. And rightfully so. But what can we do to be able to change their attitudes around or their minds and look at me as the problem within their lives? Maybe they got to start seeing the positives that I've made in my life, which I didn't see with my dad. And some of our family members. It's a tough world. Even though we're changing, we're trying, and yet our brothers and our sisters, our children, our grandchildren, are only stuck seeing the bad person in each and every one of us. That has to stop. It takes courage to be able to be here, to be who you are, and to be strong and confident of who you are. Isuk sige oy sino gutagawas kapig. Kaya matagwe sige te mahiguig tat school gagito ti te mahigawi. You stand strong today, even though that you went to these schools and were treated with disrespect and disregard for who you are, based on your identity, culture, values, and language. So proud to have the elders stand up here and speak and pray in their languages. That's beautiful to see, to hear. As we sit here today, let's think about ourselves in regards to how we can change and how we can better support one another in regards to the well-being of our families and our communities. The Métis Nation, your government, has been trying hard and will continue to work hard. And to be able to have governments look at us properly and proper engagement and capacity to be able to support the programs that are in our communities. And there's lots of them. Kiwe po kawe kain tohtawatsik. Our elders are so important and our veterans. We'll take care of them. But Tosh, you don't have to pay. We'll take care of them. We'll feed them. In our meetings, they sit in the meetings and have a voice in our Provincial Métis Council. And they have a voice at the assembly. You can see when you come. that 10 to 12 elders sit there and have a voice. In your communities, that's what has to happen in the communities. Our elders need to be listened to. They've got so much knowledge and experience and stories to tell. But our young teenagers got to start listening and paying attention in regards to where their paths are going, sometimes in the wrong way. Our children. I love my children, but there's so much I could do. I try as much as I can. I try to be the best that I could be. My wife and I. From every table, said, and Dwayne is right. We haven't seen each other for many years, some of us. But it's good to be here. Don't dwell on the past. See what you have today. But don't ever forget where we come from. I don't. I pray every day. One prayer is what I say every day before I go to bed. My dad showed me that prayer, and I will never forget. And so as you sit here, yes, there'll be bad memories. But when we fail to recognize where we're sitting and where we come from and what we have to go home to, which is our families, our children, our grandchildren, kitapana, and I have tapans too. To be able to speak to them and to be able to have, I used to have talking circles in my family. Do that at home. Don't expect somebody else to start it for you. Start it at home. That's what we did. And we're better for it. You know, kasi ito skat na oh. Tapit to kamantanin na oh. Tapto nagkuwichiyo ananis tanan. My wife has to when we travel across this province, north, central, and south. There's so many Métis people, our citizens, and First Nation, our relatives. I've got 9 grandchildren that are First Nations from different reserves. We're brothers and sisters, and we better be together, strong. The time that we have to be strong in order for governments to listen to the reality of what they've done to our people. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, and I'll be visiting because on behalf of our government, our Métis Nation government, thank you very much.
Thank you for those wonderful words, President McCallum. They hit my heart. I don't know about you, Brian Digela. Wow. Really powerful words. And like he said, you know, the healing, we need to move forward. Let's remember those words and let's start the healing process. We have mental health therapists here. Again, I'm going to stress. Let's utilize them the best we can. And I'm not going to take up much time here because we're falling behind schedule. So let's call up. Thank you so much for your kind words.
All right. So merci, our next guest that we're inviting up, and I'm really proud, you know, to introduce our next guest, our Vice President of the Métis Nation of Saskatchewan, who holds the file for the Ile-a-Crosse Residential School Committee. And I know for a fact that over the last couple of years that she's one of her main priorities, her focus has been to bring closure to the Ile-a-Crosse school issue. So she's worked hard. She continues to speak with the federal and the provincial governments on a weekly basis, I'll say. And so let's give up a warm welcome to our Vice President of Métis Nation of Saskatchewan, Michelle Leclerc.
Good morning. I won't repeat some of the great words that our president has talked about. I'd like to first of all thank Antoinette and Emile for their opening prayers. And it's not the first time I've heard them do opening prayers, but when I look at them, I see that they're getting a little bit older. But when I look at them, when they're talking about Ile-a-la-Crosse, they were just children. And so it always resonates for me how strong that they are. And so thank you for that. I want to acknowledge that we are on the homeland of the Métis and Treaty 6 territory. And I want to tell you how proud and humbled I am to be here today. I'm going to tell you how this got started. So I was running for the Métis Nation election. And I have friends, a lot of gardener friends that had been talking about Ile-a-Crosse, and I'd been reading about it. I wanted to be informed. And I ended up getting a little committee together to help me understand why nothing had happened in so many years. And so it took a little bit of time and meeting with them, and I said, okay, I'm going to promise you that this is going to be something that I'm going to focus on if I'm elected. And they were like, yeah, sure you are. So anyway, I've been keeping my promise as well as I can. I think anyone in the federal government or the provincial government that I speak to or that know me know if they look me straight in the eye, they're going to hear Ile-a-Crosse school survivors. So it's been a passion. And one of the reasons is we see that there's so many survivors that are passing away. And it's getting late in the game. You know, I think one of the school closed in 1972, which means that a lot of our survivors, the youngest of our survivors, the babies of our survivors are now well into their 50s. So it's something that is urgent and that has to happen. Before I get started too, I want to recognize the good work that is being done and has been done to organize to bring all of you beautiful people into this room. And I have to recognize Philip DeRocher. Philip, are you in the room? I don't know what we would do without Philip DeRocher. Jordan Burnoff, a young person from Ile-a-Crosse who works with me, is just phenomenal. Jordan, can you stand up? And then, of course, His Worship Dwayne Favel, who's been standing up here all morning, but have a wave. He's been working very hard on this file. And it always has the best advice for me, so thank you for that. And where's our Maureen Belanger? Where is she? Stand up, Maureen. Maureen's been working, oh, hi. Maureen has been working with us to help organize the conference. And when I was talking about, getting advice on what was happening with Ile-a-Crosse, Maureen was there by my side. I want to recognize Blackbird. It's a company that we utilize that has been helping us along the way. And then also we've got Matt LeMay at the back behind the camera there, who is working on a documentary for Ile-a-Crosse. We want to get the stories out. So that kind of brings me to a couple of things. In terms of being able to talk to a lot of people, a lot of survivors, a few themes come out. And interestingly enough, the first thing isn't compensation. It's acknowledgement and recognition that people's stories are heard that haven't been heard. Things happen here, they happen there, and I'm going to be really honest. There's always a lot of rumors, and you know how that is in our community, Moccasin Telegraph anyway. But we had a law firm who was representing your interest for almost 17 years. and he did nothing. So somebody would get a letter in the mail and it would say, we have the day school settlement. Not saying it doesn't apply to Ile-a-Crosse, just that there is a settlement, congratulations. Then what happens? In the community, everybody's saying, we've got a settlement. Not true. Or when the Indian residential school settlement happened, a letter went out. For me, that's cold, calculated, and hurtful. And so when I spoke with the Gardner family, who I just want to acknowledge they had a death in their family, so they're gone out to a viewing and they'll be back. When I talked to the Gardner family, these are things that they talked about. That our acknowledgement means you're being heard. When you can tell your story, you're being heard. And that's what this conference is about. It's about telling truths. It's about listening to those truths. It's about learning where the lawsuit is. So it's not only a few people know where it's at, because it affects all of you. It affects the kids that were in residential school, but it also affects day schoolers. So that's the change and the lawyers will talk more to you about this. The change in law and all of that, we caught up when we put the new fresh action in. So we said, we're not leaving anybody behind. No one is being left behind. We're going to do this. We're going to do it right. Boarding school survivors are in there. Day school survivors in there. Intergenerational school survivors are in there. And we're also protecting the legacy of those who have passed. So people who have passed on, a part of that negotiation will include them. If there's a settlement for those people, that goes into their estate and it goes to the children and it goes to wherever your families decide. But we've covered everything off. That didn't happen in the first lawsuit. The lawsuit was filed but never certified, which means it never got to mediation. It never went anywhere. It was the Ile-a-Crosse School Committee pushing this, and I do say, the Métis Nation as well, pushing this to the federal government to say, let's sit down and talk. Let's talk about a negotiation. Let's talk about what's fair. And the law firm that was hired at the time would not go to the table. So there have been opportunities that have been missed. And worst of all, we've lost so many of our people. And so we've got to make this right. We've got to do it right. And bringing all you beautiful people into this room, I can feel, I don't know if anybody else is feeling this, but I can feel the goodness in this room. I feel like a lot of people are happy to be here to see their friends they haven't seen in a long time, to be a community again. On your terms, not on a church's term or on the federal government's term or on the provincial government's term, certainly not on the Métis Nation's term, on your terms. And that's why we wanted to do it, to make sure that this was your conference. Hopefully you get as much as you can out of this conference. Hopefully some of you will tell your stories in a private way. When we think about it, and I won't talk much longer because you guys are probably going to get bored of me, but when we think about it, Ile-a-Crosse is one of the oldest residential schools in Canada. There is not a lot older than Ile-a-Crosse. The school, the nuns came in 1840. They had a day school running in 1845, but they couldn't keep kids in the school. So what was their answer? Let's do what everybody else is doing. We'll bring all these kids. We'll take these kids from their home and we'll put them into the boarding school. That way we can keep them. We can control them. That happened in 1860. The school ran until 1972. That's 7 generations of harm to our communities in Northwest Saskatchewan. And it's got to stop. And it needs to be recognized. And you can see the harm. I was talking to my friend who I've known for a long time. Her family's in here. She knows for sure that there was 3 generations of family, her parents, and her grandparents. Imagine that legacy when we're talking about legacies. Trauma literally becomes part of your DNA. It becomes part of who you are. And the way that you deal with this is going to be talking about it today. What are the solutions now? We know the harm. What are our solutions? What can we do to ensure that we have healthier communities? President McCallum was talking about all of the drug and alcohol, the suicides. And we're just going to keep talking about it if we don't have a solution. We have to have solutions, and you see small solutions happening in our communities. I think of Dorothy DeBray and her Elders Council in Ile-a-la-Crosse. They're trying to make healthier communities for our young people. But for me, I think we need to talk about last year. Many of you were there. I saw you at the Pope's visit when the Pope apologized. And what do apologizing mean in structures, in corporate structures? It means money. When Harper apologized, that meant money. When we got settlements for the Indian residential schools, that meant money. Day school meant money. And for my thought is we can't necessarily sue the church. It's going to take 100 years. But what we can do is create a legacy plan for our communities and say to the church, here it is. You made that mess. We'll clean it up. This is how much money we need to do that. And not let the church off the hook. So I'm going to stop because I could go on and on forever. We've wasted 15 years. This is our opportunity. We haven't wasted. Somebody else has wasted your time and your 15 years that you're not going to get back. So let's take this opportunity to come out of this conference and have some real plans. We're going to be talking about trauma and healing. And by the way, sometimes when we're talking angry with each other or at each other, that's trauma speaking, just so you know. And if you want to be full of grace when we're here, think about that. And if you're very, very angry, that's trauma. And take a moment to reach out to one of these gals or guys. Is that Spud? Spud. He's one of our mental health guys. He's a great guy to talk to. Reach out. Stop yourself and think, why am I so angry right now? Is this the right person to be mad at right now? Because the energy in this room is so positive and good. And so let's keep that going. Talk about language, culture, survivor circles. You'll have an opportunity to be able to tell your story if you want. And the really important piece, I think, for a lot of you is the legal overview. And one of the reasons for this conference that I thought is, with all due respect to the committee, everybody needs to know what's happening. Not just a few, all of us need to know what's happening. And we're going to talk about the history of unmarked graves and whether or not that's something that this group wants to explore. Do we want to start doing some ground penetration around the school? I know it was burnt down at 3 times, I think. So there's different areas, and talking to elders and seeing if that's something that you want to do. And yeah, focusing on the legacy piece. Where do we go from here? This is our opportunity to make it happen. It's an opportunity for both the federal and provincial governments to hear our voice, because if you don't think they're watching, you're wrong. They're watching this closely. So with that, you guys have a wonderful conference, and I'll try and talk to each and every one of you over the next 2 days. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those wonderful words there, Vice President Leclerc. Oh, he's got something.
Yeah, no, just going to invite the President of Métis Nation, Glenn McCollum. He's going to do a couple acknowledgements.
I'm going to sing a song. Not just kidding. And what we have the oldest living survivors residential school. I forgot when I was here to mention Alice Woods Fable, Albert Case, 91 years old, oldest survivors. They're in the room. Standing ovation, miyata. Stand up, guys. Thank you, Alice and Albert, for being here. Thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you very much, Glenn McCallum, and thank you very, very much to our Vice President, Michelle Leclerc. And that's part of the why we're here at this conference, is to bring clarity around the misinformation, the false hope, that was created over the years, to bring some clarity around that. And, to have a good path forward. And I think that our lawyers will be sharing with us this morning in terms of what that looks like. So thank you very much. And let's give Michelle one more nice warm applause.
Okay, thank you for all the presenters so far. It's been really powerful, meaningful, and as Michelle mentioned, the trauma, we have all the different workshops on that, because give you an example this morning, and I won't name names, but people starting to talk about it. So gossip, that's another thing we forgot to cover. That's destroying a lot of our communities, and that is a direct result of our pain and suffering that we are carrying within us. Let us start to heal, and let us start our healing journey. I will keep repeating that. This is your opportunity. Marcy, thank you so much. Michelle, thank you so much for, you promised something in your campaign and you did it. Thank you on behalf of Ile-a-Crosse. Vice Chief Ali Bear was supposed to be doing her greetings from the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations. There too, that's a wonderful partnership for them to acknowledge us, because we are part of the First Nations, regardless of how we look at each other. Those are our brothers and sisters. Unfortunately, she was unable to make it due to a family responsibility, but she sends her greetings and warm wishes, and wishes everyone well and a good healing journey. She may show up if she can. So with that, we were supposed to be having, Vice Chief Leclerc would like to talk.
No, I just wanted, yeah, she changed my title already. She's kicked me out of the nation. I just wanted to add something, just because Ellie's not here. We had submitted a resolution to the FSIN General Assembly a couple of months ago, Prez. And so it was about the support that FSIN would give to the Ile-a-Crosse school survivors. And it was passed unanimously by all of their chiefs. So I just wanted to add that. And when I met with Minister Miller, I think it was the week after, I talked to him about, of course, Ile-a-Crosse. He doesn't like to make eye contact with me, but he said, I told him that we had FSIN 100% behind our survivors, and you should have seen the look on his face. So each of these little pieces that we do is going to make a tremendous difference in how quickly we can get this resolved. I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Okay, wow, we're ending up into an open mic situation here. They said Jason McKay had a story, a real quick one, I hear, and then we'll move on with our program.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jason McKay. I'm the Wandering Métis with Métis Nation Saskatchewan. It's my role and job to travel around to the communities and capture stories, celebrations, cultural events, and way of life. And I was in your beautiful community of Ile-a-Crosse the other day, Sakatawak, at Rossignol Elementary School, and I spent 2 days there with Chrissy Bouvier-Lemaigue and Sharon Hoffman and all the kids. I was at the Mitchell Festival. I got lots of stories, got lots of videos of your children, your grandchildren. But I just wanted to share just a funny story, just quick before I take off. So I stopped in at SDC office, and I was talking to Tyler and Johnny Belanger, and John says, "Bro, do you have an assistant?" I said, "No, not yet." I said, "But when I do get an assistant, she's going to be a hell of a lot prettier than you, John." That's it. Thank you. So I'm walking around taking some pictures, and if you'd like to stop and talk and capture your story, more than welcome, and welcome. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I'm not a real Boulanger, by the way. I just married into. So we were supposed to go right into mental health keynote with Brenda Reynolds, but as an observant mental health professional, she noted, and we have to honor that, people are getting a little jittery, probably because they need to go to the bathroom or they need a smoke. I think we're just going to call, and we have to be really punctual, 10-minute break. Run and grab your smoke, run to the bathroom, grab your coffee, come back. We have 2 other keynotes that we need to address this morning. 10 minutes. Kinstuhtina, wow, 10 minutes. Just really quick. If the bathrooms are full, there's a back alley. I'm just kidding.
Excuse me?
Good. Let's see. Are we good? Sure, though. So, good morning. Salutin Larote. Doing Zinege once again here at Ila. Um, really time. Just wait. Tu kakahiya. So, gabing dana yan tia doing favolu. Ile-a-Crosse survivors. And na di dut ala so. Make sure share out their live feed. Then it's not there. Then another rest. Dala. Kani lawsuit going to, 15 years nothing happened Hinila. And then duhu that the Adalyasi special little things to the lawsuit not the Torlium but Ori Lisi. So a lot of good information and do I break hill chuondi doing zinage. And I radio get direct see. Good morning, Salutin all over Northwest Saskatchewan. I know Gamin Dane, Pat Dejenaire, so Bunich Erzenberg on it. I not able to make it. Doing Zinek the Ile-a-Crosse Coin Survivors Gathering. No, doing Zinek no haba. So next is gonna be keynote Brenda Reynolds, a mental health boss at doing it's a break. Actually, doing break, and maybe they switch that around, and then 11 o'clock it's a legal overview. So a lot of the recognize Ile-a-Crosse residential school. So you can that's idea, dene hell na there don't dene na he double do na he double nil, the see some bagaya tilu no tuasti asanet in delu bagaya in tiolesi healing base healing foundation de hulea ret yondala dene yansi da tie Ile-a-Crosse northern Saskatchewan addiction base da tie the school at ya hodder at the ladder dene no badaya tie dunzineke. So a lot of important things, mental healthy bagaya tirin zola tebet unra I denesan and usi benik ech ade hola no bahu island la under school that's in deal colonization dene you that saila that deal right and and u dene you elsi bets a deal lisi it's a quid equally everybody involved but then you a lot of men's mental health base untlede bagaya tilasa so no hanike chade siga de yoltiu a sont ilasa a coho dio de la healing foundation danaha nunt au dualti bets ediolisi and of course Métis Nation of Saskatchewan a no habanuni ala dunzinege samba saul ta nikole a samba but asinunt ankol not unet in deleha but unra onala then I saw hun tanin delu untadelt you kind of no it's no hedine spirit ya ze hadaz and I knew but ahid dalondala so masino anasana salotina dunzinege huntadult you social media Facebook YouTube radio garat asi and Robert Marasti sunk another and na they do sometime but ja then it's a go ahead at the interview gonna DSA so hopefully I don't interfere a hell but all this afternoon breakout sessions as 1 o'clock what's in 3 o'clock what's in breakout 2 o'clock what's in so 1 hour breakout sessions about 5 different ones on the sun and as you heard I see bo Ile Nila. So only the registered survivors at Janine Deliha, just at max capacity. See, but you're able to watch it live here at AFTC. Just the breakout sessions. Then I'm gonna try to get it on Julius Park language and culture base yaltiaza. So I'm gonna go over there. Dok see. Hopefully, try to set it all up. A Julius Parka dun zinege I had it isiga yaltisi. So I believe it's very important. Nuni dana sultina daidlina tu no ayatie bega dailni lisi nuni beganay data zondala. Dene beganil are well dodi Deneginil adua nenaril yele nenarun nabawal yele adilin da asleda kondo asliniza. So Julius the aslne de helnio maybe aslne go there hasa not usal holnia de but c'est teacher the helnio elementary school and duhu is aslne de c'est enya that u dene sidet isu and do that isiat diu bagan yail and about Thai sata who there's not a balia in a podcast I don't know inde but duhum bahal I'll try to get that in while we're live here doing zineke but duhum that's in daylight then a quick little break and then we're gonna go into the presentation, I do believe. But stay tuned, Salutina. I'm just gonna find out here, and I'll be back. And then then a holiday out here. Don't you? We'll see if we get Robert Marasti on here, and we'll continue on. Masi. Testing. Good morning.
Good morning.
Dito.
Just Ile.
Cool.
Morning.
Oh, I think testing, 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 testing. Oh yeah, it should be. Kuya NFT.
Daar is hier, ja. Dan bel je. Dat doe schoolleider en dat was niet. Ja, no.
La.
Ah,
La.
oh.
Just say hi, what's up? So good mornings, hello tine once again. Doon tine ke Ace Hulya, Uncle Ace. Doon ano slumba Zigor Shala James Mongren. but Atlanta Uncle Ace.
Sandile.
Na barl yan doon la Atlanta then doon si survivors gathering noon azi.
Eso tanto ya survivors gathering non dana sa das ile ni school aster nante. Eso la tanto no ha me tit dana no ha kana degi to no kadora chawli da school light there.
Yeah, and one of the things that there is school bagande at everywhere is recognize al yel and see. Do horns end up Atlant just that acknowledgement that there is school that you know honest the First Nations Day residential school recognize al yaw what's in their Ile-a-Crosse school recognize al yele na Atlanta.
Eskile boy on la do eskasit dan daitu eskasit tanto government a school dan no hin lao. Eskasit work do new eskasit dan no hel au. Eskasit ya tant eskasit work sana ni hadua na sana dan do dan sana dan ni kesin.
Oh yeah. And you know one of the things that you denatanya gande altila abuse. Glanitha your school line there.
Dina school either 1970 huna na sa gayo ay ni yao 14 sa gayo ay titinasta a school sitting in Ile-a-la-Crosse. The community took over the school in Ile-a-la-Crosse. It's on the school like day 1974 a school down Michelle 72 a mistake is
Oh
74 a school down
74. Okay. Not in a year, didn't you?
14 sa gayo you quit.
Oh yeah. Are you quit boarding school Hudzinu or just school
Boarding school a huji.
Oh, okay. But Indian school Hulyesinu? Indian day school?
Hit ule.
Or just boarding school
Boarding school
Oh, okay.
residency too.
Do na basont elu bagayan LT and do you know a lot of traumatic events who I don't know that the Houthi yasi na badlant do bagayan LT.
Thailand ile
Mm.
sa idang au si sa nasdia dinilt anay dela sa kike
Mm.
sita terrorist yung kut anandere holidays kana sa dilo welfare anay dini ano ni nano anahuil hila no ni nay deu kut ahan ya
Yeah.
dinilt yo choya sa kike dana chile datsa ay ba sa ji ni hila don't ya
Oh, okay. Yeah. La lash it's in Ohil Chunio.
Allah welfare nano health too all across dana kone no halya it's a residence dana halya ay sadana sa kike na tes asaja estiba kadon nila
Oh,
no ni
okay.
sa sa kike to ay halya na iter ni ay zasont ile ay ana residential school dana halya ay sa kike na tes asiji ana daidli le dun hoje dia
Oh, okay. Denesana Daniel or Denesushina.
dana sana de la shu pachunaku Delano Michelle Village St. George yung Garson Lego
Turner.
Turner Lego Nachinak na senior astana
Mm.
dana salu go dana sounds nice there
Yeah.
Garson Lego tio
Yeah, you know, Torlunka in Denenalciona. One of the things I got thele den halya iltin nuni tin telas tours in Tuluni Island is your school nunt isla ertlisie bul ania. I see a snat la duna inside your school nunt on it in a stenarsi.
Alash
Eh?
Liland ala
Then a sanat deo, you know, maybe.
dana sa si za za wal yelu to ni thanisa
Mm, yeah. Yeah.
Kole ko government and u ni dana ay school das chili wad dana sana sa warehouse na di dan leo kon tu dan dal ni horel on la dina dan tu ya chaka dorel ha
Yeah.
ay on la
Mm.
ay wa ko wad dana ni the school hot ni ne kona the school na da de chi long de bon skin le ha ko ja ay al on la school so ka
Yeah. Sadune totine chani kese ikana in denisi. But don't think bona need dia mas senior sent Uncle Ace, you know, is my uncle since I was a kid. Doing busy James will or Shala, but seen Nes and doing something too. Dennis don't see it, but obviously, but do it in Ilatanet EQ, but seen Nes because it might allow somebody else at their own pain. So must soon maybe. Sometime over the next few days, it's like an IT net in Lausanne.
Okay, merci, Sazin.
Merci.
Yeah, Minister.
Already, salutin a James Mongrand Adila Uncle Ace. I'm gonna hand it over back to the conference. Doing there's gonna be a couple presentations. So, Harult radio gaderult anemasi choner hosin salutin doing Zineke.
And in Salon C, we're going to be having a survivor circle that's going to be hosted. It says here Chuck McCallum, but his name is Tom McCallum. We know him as Chuck in Ile-a-la-Crosse, but he's moved to BC. It's Tom now. And then on Salon A and B, which is here, we're going to have the legal overview. So if you haven't finished asking questions about legal stuff, you can stay here and continue your conversation or come back at 1 o'clock. And then we're going to have no history. That's the unmarked burials. And we're going to have, that's in Salon D if you have any questions. And we have some informational booths out there. And I'm going to have to ask to be forgiven, but we're still kind of sorting out rooms. If you need a quiet space, there is a room available for that, where they've allowed us to do some smudging, sweetgrass and stuff like that, if you're into that, if you need that space. We also have, as I mentioned, the other group. Anyways, well, I'll let you guys know at lunchtime. Let's get on with the program. Alphonse, what are you stealing? Quanta suits his second month? He's filling up his little orange bag on the side. Okay, we're going to ask the mental health keynote to be delivered by Brenda Reynolds. So I don't have a bio of her, so maybe she can briefly introduce herself and get on, and then she'll do her presentation. I mean, no disrespect.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Brenda Reynolds, and I just wanted to thank the people for the prayers. I did the prayers this morning, and of course the leadership. It's always good to start off in a good way. And I just also wanted to express my I've worked with residential school since the late 80s, but with the settlement agreement, I did some work with the settlement agreement right from the very beginning, and I think this is the first time I've ever seen a school gather all their former students in one place, and so it makes me feel really happy that all of you are here together. And of course, that brings along a lot of mixed emotions as when you gather, and probably when you started hearing about gathering. So I'll just quickly introduce myself and then get on with what it is that I was asked to present. Like I said, my name is Brenda Reynolds, and I'm from Fishing Lake. I'm Soto, and my dad, he's passed now. His name was Jerry Casias, and my mom is Florence Casias, but her last name was Desjardins. And I grew up on my reserve. I started off in day school and went to school there. I came to university here in Saskatoon, and excuse me, I did my social work degree here, and I have a master's in counseling psychology and almost finished a doctorate in psychology as well. And but I just went to my reserve yesterday, so it feels really good for me to be speaking my language, and I can understand some of the words that people are using here too. And I've lived in Alberta I left in 1988, and I've been in Alberta since then. It wasn't a choice that I moved. I had to move, and the reason why I had to move was when I finished my social work degree, I worked at a school here in Saskatoon. I was recruited to do some work as a high school counselor at a school in Saskatoon. But I was the only Indigenous staff person and the only Indigenous person in the school. And that was a really different experience for me. But during that time, I met a teacher in an elementary school here in Saskatoon who had some concerns about some of the little kids that were in her classroom. She was a grade 3 teacher. And she was having concerns about some of the kids coming to school hungry, and attendance was poor and not dressed for the weather, and they weren't doing good in school mark-wise and that kind of stuff. And so eventually what I did is I started an after-school program with these little kids on a volunteer basis. The reason I'm telling you this story is because it really has made a significant impact in terms of my own experience and not only life experience, but my career experience as well. So what I did with these little kids was I developed an after-school program on how to play, but talking about abuse. What does abuse look like, and how do you talk about abuse, and how, when you realize that you're abused, what do you do with that, and who do you go and see, and who do you get support, and that kind of stuff. And so these little kids were talking about their experiences really similar to how I grew up on my reserve. And they were talking about going home to parties and where they would witness fighting, violence amongst each other, the people that were partying, and they were witnessing sexual assaults. And one of the little boys, who was 8 years old, he was talking about how he protected himself, how he would go and sleep in a closet and put a bunch of clothes over himself so that nobody would find him during the night. And so we did this all by play. And these little kids, the teacher was soon after noticing big changes in these kids because they were coming to school more and they were talking more, and other kids wanted to join our group, but I have 5 kids, and I was feeding my kids. I was feeding the 10 kids I was working with, and I couldn't feed any more than the 15 kids that I had at that all together. And I told the teacher, as soon as one of these little kids drops out, we can replace that little one with another little one. Those little kids never dropped out. They stayed in school, and they also stayed with the program. But I really had a great experience with working with these little kids and talking to them about the abuse and teaching them these little life skills that were so essential. And back then, the schools were still open in Saskatchewan, and Gordon's was operated by Indian Affairs at the time. And I went to Gordon's and I said, I've developed this play therapy program. I would like to bring it here. And there was some resistance in the beginning of saying, oh, we don't want social workers to be coming around here, and we're okay. But with a little bit of pressure, I convinced them that would be a really good thing for the kids to learn how to talk about their feelings and identify their feelings. And so that's what I did. I went to Gordon's as a counselor. But because I didn't go to residential school, it was my first experience when I went to work there, what a residential school was. So it was really shocking for me. It was really interesting to work with these little kids who were first time experience in the residential school, and how they were lonely and that kind of stuff. But I did the same thing with these little kids in Gordon's that I did with the ones that I did here in Saskatoon, was teaching them about abuse and teaching them about how when they're lonely, it's okay to cry, and how to support each other in the school. If an older kid saw a little kid crying or being lonely, it was okay to go and talk to them about how they were able to cope and what they did to survive in the school, right? Because some of them were there already for years, and the little ones, the new ones that came in grade 1 and grade 2, it was their first time. So of course they were lonely. And so I did that kind of stuff. And then as grandparents on Gordon's were finding out that I was teaching the kids this kind of stuff, they wanted to learn how to, they would say, can you talk to my grandkids in there? I said, well, I'll teach you how to talk about your feelings and that kind of stuff. And so I did that kind of thing. But what happened at the 2 weeks before the end of the school year is that this one 13-year-old girl came to talk to me about how she was being touched by the head childcare worker. And so I told her I had, what I had to do and that kind of stuff. And then so I called the police and we took a statement, and I opened the door and I told the constable, I said, I'll be right back. I said, I'll just go run her back to her dorm. I'll come back and then we'll close up here. But when I opened the door, there was another little girl that was there. And she goes, I want to talk about my same experience that she had by the same person. So I said, okay, so we'll do that. 17 times that happened that night. All these little girls from 13 to 16 years old were all being touched by the same staff member. And this was in June, and he was charged. And he was the first one to be charged at a residential school in Saskatchewan. And he was later charged for many other charges against other students and from that same school. But 2 other staff were also charged for sexual abuse in that same school. One of them had 427 charges against him, the most of any staff member in Canada. And all 3 of the staff were all Indigenous people. And so that experience was, after what happened, was really frightening, because some of the former students that were living on the reserve started calling me a troublemaker for teaching these kids on how to talk about abuse. And how dare I teach these little kids on how to talk about abuse? And so they started threatening me. I started getting assaulted physically and bullied, and I'd be driving along, and next thing my vehicle would be getting hit from behind or even trying to hit me head on. And so that stress of trying to stay alive was really stressful. And the police in Punachai, which is just not too far from Gordon's, suggested that I leave. And because they couldn't do anything to protect me with all the violence that I was getting, and all the threats that were made to kill me because of teaching these little kids about the abuse. So that's why I had to leave Saskatchewan. It wasn't because I wanted to leave my home. And so I went to Alberta, and that's where it is that I've been in Alberta since then. I went to Northern Alberta. But my experience was, like, I was just right out of university. I was in my 20s when all of this happened. I didn't know that residential schools went beyond Saskatchewan, And when I went to this community in Northern Alberta, there's 2 schools on that reserve, and I thought, oh my gosh, it's like, this thing followed me, right? And I didn't know the history of how long we had the schools, because we didn't talk about stuff like that back then, right? It wasn't, we saw it and we lived it. We lived through the consequences of that, but we didn't talk about what went on to the residential schools and how kids ended up in residential schools. That was something we didn't talk about. And so what I did in Saskatchewan with those little kids, I did the same thing in Alberta after I found out that they had similar experiences, right? And so that's what I've been doing since I was young, is working with residential school students, and then later on former Indian residential school students. And so I've grown up doing this work, because it taught me so much. And then in 2007, when the settlement agreement happened, in the settlement agreement, there's one provision there that said that Canada had to provide emotional support to former students. They needed support when they were going to go through the settlement agreement. But the regional director general at the time from Alberta, he said, we don't know what to do. We don't know how to provide support. We don't know what that looks like. And he said, and I stood up and I said, Alberta will do something. And he said, but I need you to help me. By that time, I was doing crisis work on reserves as a therapist. And so I agreed. And I said, it's going to cost you a lot of money. I said, because the workers are going to be all Indigenous people, and they all are going to be either former students or people who have been impacted by their own experiences in growing up in homes of where former students were. And so the workers that you saw here, the Resolution Health Support Program, that's the program that I developed back in 2007. It had never been done before, and anywhere in Canada. It had never been done in the world. And so when I would go and research on how to do this, I had nothing to go on. But what I did, though, is from my own experience of growing up in my reserve and my own experience with knowing the value of language, knowing the value of our culture, and how when we know our culture and our language, we can heal from that. We heal from the ceremonies, and those are our ways. And so I included that in the settlement, in the health support program, is how we could heal ourselves by getting to know who we are and using culture as one of our healing ways, because culture is one of the biggest things that they try to take away from us in the residential schools, in the policy. And so there's the emotional support therapists, and there's the therapist. And because I'm professional, Westernly trained as a therapist, I also know the value of what good talk is, and being able to listen to someone who's going to listen to you, who isn't going to judge you, who is going to listen to your truth. Because a lot of times I have found in my work is that former students, when they started talking, nobody ever believed them before, or they didn't want to share their feelings because they felt ashamed of their experiences that they had when they were in residential school. And because they were separated from their parents, they weren't taught on how to speak and identify what those feelings were and what those experiences were. And so that's how it was. I developed the health support program, and we provided support all over Canada. And so the workers that are here, there's more than 800 across the country. And then we worked with the settlement agreement, and we worked with the Truth and Reconciliation when that became one of the components of the residential school settlement agreement. And when the second set of commissioners came in for the Truth and Reconciliation, they asked me to help, and so I did that. And so when I was talking to Jordan, I had recommended to her to consider inviting the National Centre for Truth and Reconciliation to come. One part of the things that they do is they still do statement gathering. No one else knows what your experiences are, what it is that you went through residential school. And it's so important to document those experiences, whether they're good or hurtful, whatever those experiences are. We need to keep that documented, because Canada has destroyed records of what those experiences were. And we've had a hard time finding records of names of kids. Sometimes when you went to school, your name was changed, and sometimes it was spelt different, right? And we had a hard time in supporting former students get their records so that they can get compensated. And so it's so important for you to think of giving your statement, and it's a way of educating our own families and our communities and everyone else in Canada about what happened in the residential school experience. That we cannot forget what happened in those schools. And so that is so important to do that for statement gathering, and it's going to help you in your own work and in your own healing. I've seen people heal from that as they're going along. But I'm just going to keep on going along here, and trauma is what it is that I've been asked to talk about today. And this is an area it is that I've been working with since I started working with those little tiny kids in the schools. But I didn't know I lived it as well when I was growing up. And I didn't know that until many years, because sometimes when we're living in it, we don't even know that that is not the right way, that harmful way of living is not a good way of living. And so I'll explain to you briefly, and the things I'm going to be talking to you about, there's so many layers of it, there's so much information, but I'm just going to be giving you brief information about it because it's really, I think it's really important to understand our experiences and how it is that we can heal and we can heal our families. So when we have a traumatic experience, it happens to everybody, regardless if we're Indigenous or not, it happens to us as people. And what trauma is that, because sometimes now people will say, oh, I've been traumatized, when really that isn't trauma. But what trauma is that when an event happens to you that is totally out of your control, say that there's a natural disaster like a fire or a flood, and you have to leave your community, or sometimes you leave your home. That's a traumatic event. It's totally out of your control. Or if you've been diagnosed with a serious illness like cancer, and again, that's out of your control, and you get impacted by it. Or a car accident, or you witness a car accident, or you witness a murder, or you witness a sexual assault, or even a physical assault. That's trauma. And what happens is that, so here is our brain, and inside our brain is the oldest part of our bodies. And that's where we feel it. It's the reptilian part of the brain is what I call it. And when we experience trauma, our heart rates go up, and our legs maybe will get shaky. We start getting scared. That's where we feel it, in that part of our brain. And our brain tells us that I'm being sexually assaulted here as an example. I'm afraid. I'm a little kid and this person is sexually assaulting me. I don't know what to do. I'm unsafe. I don't know what to do. And that's where we feel it. And that's how our heart rate goes up. Our blood pressure goes up. Our blood goes away from our stomach. It goes to our legs and our arms, because we're going to either run away, we're going to fight, or we're going to disassociate. Disassociate is when our minds, we start focusing on different things so that we don't have to feel it physically. That's how our bodies respond to trauma. But our bodies were not meant to withstand the amount of trauma it is that we have experienced as Indigenous people. Our bodies were meant to be, when we have a traumatic experience like what I just said, like the car accident, is that our bodies were meant to have that just experience last and stay with us for just a few minutes. Then our bodies calm down and then we're okay. But what happens to us as Indigenous people is that we have another layer of trauma that has happened to us as Indigenous people, and this is based on racism and based on discrimination. And it's trauma, I call it, related to oppression. And this is where the Indian residential schools come in, and also the child welfare. Since the 1800s, the government has been taking our kids to destroy who we are. That was the effort that was done. That's the trauma it is that we've been experiencing, in addition to all the other normal traumas. And so day school experiences in the Indian hospitals, and so we've been having generations and generations of this traumatic experiences within our communities and within our families. And so it is, one of the speakers said about the DNA having, like with trauma, but what it is that when we have a traumatic experience, what happens to us is that because this happens in the reptilian part of the brain, that part of the brain only knows those three feelings that I talked about, the fighting, the running, and the disassociation. And then, but when we have that experience, our bodies remember and store it in different places. Some people will say when they start getting triggered, they feel the tension in their shoulder. Some people talk about having their stomachs get a little upset and getting knots in their stomach. That's where it is that they store their trauma. Our bodies remember. And sometimes when we are triggered, and as I started saying in the beginning, when you guys heard of this gathering happening and seeing other students, and maybe sometimes you haven't seen each other for many, many years. Maybe the last time you saw each other was back in the school days. So you started thinking of what it was that had happened to you, right? And then because of if you were sexually abused, or if that you remember that removal from the home, you're not going to remember all the details because this part of the brain does not remember details. It's the front part of our brain that remembers the details, and this is where it is that you think. And so sometimes you hear people saying you have to go from the mind to the heart to do healing, and it's this part it is that you have to do some healing with. And so, and when you get triggered by a sound, a smell, a song, something that it is that you hear, and you feel it in your body. Like one thing as an example, I'll share with you is that when I was small, and I didn't go to residential school, but every late summer, I remember the school bus coming around, and the school bus would come around, and the kids, the school bus would be full and it would leave. I remember the loneliness that was felt in the community afterwards. I never knew what that was related to. I never knew where all these kids went to because we didn't talk about it. We didn't talk about how these kids disappeared and how some of them came back and how some of them didn't come back. But I remember being lonely every September. For many, many years, I was in my early 20s until I started questioning, why am I lonely every September? And that was because my body remembered that experience from when I was a child. It was, I didn't have to think that it was going to be September. My body just remembered. And that's what trauma does to us, is our bodies will get triggered and the memories come up. And sometimes it's, like my experience was every September, that fall time of the year, I would remember until I was able to put the memory and that experience together and find out why it was that I was lonely that time. I dealt with it and it was okay and it went away. And that's what it is that we do with the trauma, because you can heal from trauma. But one thing that is really hurtful for trauma as a part of it is the way that we communicate. And we're adults, and we teach our kids this too, is that sometimes we are hurting people with how it is that we talk, with how it is that we say things. And I remember this one office that I had worked in, and our receptionist to the staff, she was really kind to us and joyful and laughter and making sure that we were looked after and behind the reception desk. And I got a few complaints about her, and the complaints were how she didn't appear friendly, and people were scared to come to the office because she would be aggressive. And I called her into my office to talk to her about that. And then she said, "What do you mean I'm not friendly?" And I said, this is what people are saying, is that they're scared of you because when they come in, you say, "What do you want? What can I help you with?" And I said, when you say that, when I'm copying what it is that you're saying and how you say it, does that appear friendly? And she started to cry and she said, "No, that doesn't appear friendly." the way that we say things, it could be the same words that I say, how can I help you? And the way that she was saying it don't match. The way that we feel does not match our tone of voice and the volume of our tone of voice. And so when I say that we fight and hurt each other with our communication, that's what it is that I'm talking about, because we are communicating from our fearful part of our brain. That is the way that we hurt people now, is by communication and the gossiping that happens. And when you're communicating from this traumatic style of communication, is that you're either a judge and say, I remember you when you were 17, you did this, blah, 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 blah. And even though that you're doing good now, but I'm going to remember this thing that you did when you were 17 years old. Even though that isn't your life now, that isn't your behavior now, but they will bring memories back from a long time ago and don't want to say anything positive about you, because that's from the traumatic form of communication. And so you could either be a judge, where you're judging people and hurting people by communicating in that way. And if that's not working for you, then you become the victim. Oh, Sally there is always putting me down. And yet I'm trying my best to be a good cousin to her, but she still puts me down. You make yourself the victim. Poor me. And because it wasn't working when you're the judge, and now it's turned around and you're trying to make people believe you. And so now you become the victim. I want you to feel sorry for me. Even though I was just judging you a few minutes ago, and even though I might be not taking responsibility for what it is that I've said or treated some people. And so really, really hurtful way of communication. And so when you find yourself that when you're starting to communicate in that way, you're going to feel your heart rate going up. You're going to feel those knots in your tummies. Find out, why is it that I have to say that about Sally? Why is it that I'm so hurtful to her? Why isn't that I can't say anything good about her, even though I know that she's living in a good way? And because when we communicate like that, it's about us. It's about us and how we're feeling. If we're judging others, stop to think about, why do I have to judge that person? Why am I saying that? Is it because of how I'm feeling? And we have to change our ways in the way it is that we communicate. We have to listen, and really, really listen. Instead of, if someone is talking to me, I'm thinking of, I can tell Larry, because I can see your name tag. I can tell Larry I can give him advice, even though he's not asking me for advice. He's coming to me to listen, to talk to me, but I'm going to tell him what to do, even though he's not asking for advice, because I know better. I am the judge, and I am going to tell Larry what to do. We have to learn how to listen to people, and without any judgment, without any ill will to it, just to learn how to listen. And I had to learn how to do this for myself, because it wasn't how I grew up. When my kids would come and talk to me about something, I would want to give them advice and everything else. And I remember my little one, my oldest one now, but he was little at the time. I said, you didn't come to ask me what to do, did you? And because I realized I was losing him already, right? I was losing him in his train of thought, and probably thinking, oh, I didn't want to ask Mom for that. I just wanted her to listen to me. And so I had to learn how to do that. What I did was I used to put my hand under my lap so that I would listen, and really listen without judging him, without having this whole expectations, without any soliciting anything from me. So it's a way of changing our ways, is by listening. And there is so much, maybe I'll talk a little bit about this, because this is probably really important. There is so much that we need to do in terms of healing, by the way we communicate is a great way to do it. And we're the only ones that we can do that ourselves. And if we start listening and communicating with each other in that way, in a loving way that we feel, it's going to make a difference in terms of healing. I used to be a therapist in this one community in Alberta for 19 years. And this one time there's 34 people that died in a very short period of time. And so what I did, I started off a support group for grief and loss. And then we started talking about suicide because one of the grandmothers was saying, one of my grandkids is suicidal and what do I say to him? And then so I started role playing and say, how do you say what it is that you've been talking to him about? And then she said, you have every reason to live, like don't do this. And then another lady said to her, well, I would kill myself too if you were talking to me like that, you know? But we did role playing and with your volume down, and how does that love from your heart come across when you're talking? Makes big changes when we do that. And so that's what it was that we used to do. But I want to go back to trauma again, and I think it's really important to talk about the symptoms when you are feeling trauma that is being woken up. Sometimes physically we start having, like I said before, our bodies remember, and it will come back to us in different ways. And sometimes you'll have trouble with sleep, because as soon as you put your head on the pillow, your mind starts remembering those things, right? And then you have a hard time sleeping, or you wake up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning and thinking about whatever it is. And so that's our body's physical way of reacting to those traumatic experiences. And sometimes you're remembering it, but it comes out when someone comes to say something to you, and it comes out in a big anger burst. And you get mad at someone they could be asking you for a cup of coffee, and you'll yell at them and you'll get angry at them. And it comes out in that way. So we have to, again, pay attention to how it is that we're behaving and how it is that we're acting. And sometimes, depending on what kind of traumatic experience it is that you had, whether if it was physical abuse or sexual abuse, if you were physically hit all the time, is that you might get, if somebody comes behind you, you'll get startled because you're used to being hit, right? Or if you're sitting next to me and I'm always talking with my hands, I could scare someone and trigger off a memory by just moving my arms. Because some people will become hyper vigilant in learning how to scan the room and learning how to be on edge all the time. So that's a physical response that we're having to our traumatic memories. And intrusion is when, again, this can happen with nightmares. I'll share an experience I had with this one group that I was working with. And this lady was talking about how she had her grandkids apprehended and feeling sadness and anger about her grandkids being apprehended. She started, when she was sleeping, her husband woke her up because she was screaming. She was having a nightmare. So it happens by nightmares. But her nightmare was related to when she herself was first taken from residential school, and that fear that she had felt when she was taken and didn't know where she was going to, and she was separated from her mom. And so it can come to us in nightmares. I remember going through the settlement agreement. Lots of former students, as they were going through the common experience in different parts of the settlement agreement, talked about how they would have nightmares. And so what do you do with that? And so again, it's talking about those experiences and going to talk to someone that you trust, who is going to listen to you and who is going to believe you. Because sometimes in the beginning of the settlement agreement is that many had not shared what their experiences were. And so it was finding someone who is that you can trust and that you could share those experiences with. And so that if you had a nightmare, you can talk to that person about, and that's the health support program that those workers that were here, they've been working with trauma for a long time. They have that experience and they can help you with this. And then of course, like sometimes you don't even know why it is that you have an increased heart rate and your body starts remembering again. And that's exactly what it is. It's remembering some of those traumatic experiences. Sometimes those traumatic experiences are when your heart starts going and your legs start shaking, is that if you are going into the avoidance stage, like this gathering might have started some of this, people feeling this way already, because if someone knows that you were physically assaulted or sexually assaulted, and I keep on saying sexually assaulted because it was such a huge part of all of the things it is that we had heard going through the settlement agreement and my work with former students, is that there was a lot of sexual abuse that happened. And so if someone was sleeping to me in the next bed, another child was sleeping to me in the next bed, they knew that I was being taken by a staff member, and I would come back crying and that kind of stuff. They knew that, but we didn't talk about it. Sometimes when you're avoiding, you will avoid that person, because they might remember you. They might remember that. And you don't want that person to remind you of that experience. So you're going to do what you can to avoid that person. You can avoid people, you can avoid events if you think that you're going to be seeing certain people there. And you might not go there because you don't want to see people there. The residential schools, lots of them were torn down because former students didn't want those buildings up. Just because the building is gone doesn't mean that those memories and experiences are gone too, because we have those in our memories, right? Tearing down the building doesn't do the healing. Because we have to do that internal work ourselves. So that's what the avoidance is. And sometimes too, it comes back to us in the way that we think and in our moods as well. Sometimes we have negative moods where we're not feeling so good. And sometimes too is that we have a tough time remembering what those details are, because it only stayed in one part of our brain and it didn't come to the front part of our brain. So sometimes we have a tough time remembering that. And lots of times when you're having a traumatic experience, trauma history is that we have a tough time seeing good in events and in people. And that's, again, that related to when I was saying about the way that we judge. Ambiguous loss. It's important to talk about the ambiguous loss, because the work, if you decide to go through as a part of your class action, if you decide to go with unmarked graves, that's some of the work it is that I also do is I'm on a national committee for unmarked burials. But as with any loss, it is that we have and I'll talk about death as an example, but there's many kinds of losses, but death, I'll talk about that, is that when a person dies, sometimes we think of, why did that happen? And we want to know, we want to understand why an individual died. We don't have the answers all the time. We don't have an understanding of why it is that a person died at that time, at that age. If a young person died, we think, why did they go when they were so young? There are some things that we cannot and will never have answers for. And if you go down this process of the unmarked burials, you have to expect that as a part of the process, because there are some things that we don't have answers for. And that part is a part of any grieving, of any losses it is that we have. And the other part that is related to unmarked burials or missing kids is that records were not kept in the way that they should have been kept. When the settlement agreement happened, a lot of records were destroyed by churches and by governments, and those weren't there. We had no access to that. And I know that there's a lot of work being done now to try to access some of those records, but that's part of the loss. And so if you decide to go with acknowledging the unmarked burials and the missing kids, is to think of what it is that you can do culturally and what it is that you can do to celebrate those lives that were either the kids went missing or they died, and that there's no records or we don't know where they were buried at. So you have to think of what is it that you're going to do to celebrate that. I'll share one experience of a family I worked with. Their daughter had gone missing, and but they didn't talk about it as a family. And when we have funerals, those funerals are for us, for the people who it is that are still alive, to go there and celebrate that person's death. When my dad died, there's over 700 people that came. And I went around asking them to find out what their connection and what their relationship to my dad was. I wanted to know how my dad impacted their lives. And they were talking about how he would always say hi to them and he was always so friendly and that kind of stuff. And so when we have those memorials, that is for us. That is for us in the way that we heal with that loss. And so that's important. Part of the ambiguous loss is how are we going to deal with that? But ambiguous loss doesn't always necessarily mean that a child or someone has died or they've gone missing. It also refers to where we have people who are still alive who are using drugs and alcohol or an illness where they're here physically, but they're not with us mentally. And this also happens with the devices. I could be sitting here with a group of friends. They would be on their device texting and communicating with someone else, but they're right here in front of me, but they're not present. They're not here in the gathering, they're somewhere else. And we see this lots of times. We see this with kids and that kind of stuff. I wanted to talk about a little bit about intergenerational trauma. And the reason why it's so important to talk about intergenerational trauma is that the way that we have learned how to cope by using substance abuse, by using violence, by detaching from our relationships and not being present with our families, is that abnormal behavior, like what I had just shared, has become our normal lives. It has become normal in our communities to see high numbers of people who are using substances. And this has been going on for a long, long time. We have seen and witnessed family violence in our communities. We witness violence in general in our communities, and where people are not safe in their homes. That's the abnormal stuff that has become our normal. But you can heal from that. But before I talk about the healing, is that abnormal stuff is the intergenerational trauma. We pass that on to generations and generations because we think that's how it is that we have to live. I'll share one recent experience with you. I was doing some work on the East Coast, and they're doing great work, and it's important work that needs to be done. But one of the lawyers and they had asked me to help them set up a process where they can work from a trauma-informed perspective, but train workers, community workers, on how they can become the supports. And so that's what I was doing. But one of the lawyers would talk to me privately, he would talk to me where he would yell at me, and he would physically be intimidating me. He would come to me like jumping at me physically. And the first time it happened, I thought, oh, well, like he must be just having a bad day or whatever it is, right? I wrote it off. I didn't think anything more about it. The second time it happened, I said, wait a minute. I said, wait a minute. I said, like, it's like, you don't have to be yelling at me. I'm right here. I'm close to you. You don't have to be yelling at me. Please don't do that. The third time it happened, I left that room crying and I was physically shaking. I was afraid. And I went back to my hotel room and his room was below me. And I could not sleep because I was trying to figure out, why the heck am I afraid? I couldn't even phone my husband to tell him what it was that had just happened. And the next morning I flew back and I landed in Toronto. That was my first stop. And I phoned my husband. I said, this is what had happened to me last night. I was so afraid. And I didn't even want to leave my room because I thought of, what if I run into him and he's going to be yelling at me again. But yelling at me in a way that was condescending, that was on the edge of putting me down. And I told him, I said, like, I spent my night crying and just afraid. And so I said, I'm trying to connect. Why am I feeling the way it is that I'm feeling? By the time I made it back to Edmonton, I figured it out. What my body was remembering was my early experiences of being bullied. And that was the last time I had felt like that, when I was bullied. And by the time I got home, I said to my husband, I said, I'm not going to go through this again. I am not going to be bullied by someone, because now I could label it. I could label what it was that I was feeling and why I was feeling it. And I also said, when I was younger, I put up with it because I didn't know better. I didn't know better. I thought that this was the way that I had to live. I thought this was the way that I was going to be looked after, was by being yelled at and being put down and being intimidated physically. Now I'm older and I know better. And so I called the lawyer the next day and I said, the next time you do this to me, I'm going to walk out and I'll tell you that I am not going to listen to you until you're calm, and that we can talk about this in a way that we're respecting each other. And he said, no, you can talk to the commissioners about this. And so I thought about it, and I did do all that kind of stuff, and I thought about it. And I decided the best thing for me to do was to resign, because no one else saw that. But that kind of behavior has become so normal in our communities that we think that this is the way it is, right? And so intergenerational trauma, that's what that is, when we repeat stuff that have hurt us and we pass that on to the next generation. But you can heal from that. You can absolutely heal from that. And that is called post-traumatic growth. I have seen thousands of people who have healed from our traumatic experiences. And they heal by doing the work, by changing the way it is that they communicate. They change by accepting responsibility for what it is that they have done, and by not judging themselves and no longer feeling shame for their experiences. Because again, trauma is when things happen to us that are out of our control. Now we're older, we're in control, and people who have made a decision to make changes in their life and say, I have had enough of this. I am not going to live like this anymore. I'm not going to live in that kind of pain anymore. And they change. And the ways that they change is by believing in a spiritual belief again, is that there is a higher power than us that will see us through this. And by going back to some of our cultural beliefs and some of our cultural practices. Because in some of our cultural practices, it tells us how to love each other, how to love ourselves, how to be respectful, and those values, right? And also, we also learn that we are valuable and that we have a self-worth, and that we are actually, it's okay for us to have good opportunities and take advantage of those opportunities that are given to us, that we have potential and that we could use those potentials to do the great work it is that we do. And because every single one of us has different skills that we're given, different talents it is that we're given. We use those talents when you have done your traumatic work to live in the best way it is that you can, so that you don't have to live in the trauma, that we could actually change and make things different for generations that are coming in front of us. And so I just wanted to say miigwech for inviting me, and I'm going to be around for the day. If somebody wants to talk, I'm more than happy to spend some minutes with you, but thank you for the invitation and spending the morning with me. Thank you. I could, but then I just...
Thank you so much. That was absolutely wonderful. Another round of applause for Brenda Reynolds. I know when listening to her talk, I'll be really brief because legal team is going to be up here and we only have half hour. But even me, when she was talking about stuff there, that I got a trigger. I remember we lived across the lake, La Puente Trump, and I'd see every fall I'd get a seasonal depression. I labeled myself, wah wah. Anyways, every fall I'd get lonely and I couldn't figure out what was going on. Boy, one day I sat there and then I remembered, and the vision that came into my head was I could see my brothers and my sisters with a little sleigh taking their little, we didn't have suitcases, little cardboard box, and I'd watch them go across the lake. So once I was able to tap into that myself personally, I was able to deal with it every fall. I'd pray and I'd give an offering, and and then I got better because now I don't have seasonal depression. Anyways, you don't want to know about me. I just want to acknowledge Betty Nippy Albright, MLA Saskatoon Center. I understand you're visiting us. Where are you? Oh, there she is in the corner. Hello, Tonse. We got the politicians sneaking in, but they're putting themselves in the back. And we also have these beautiful metal feathers that were generously donated to all the survivors. So if you're an Ile-a-Crosse boarding school survivor, please help yourself to one. And this is from Nutrien. So let's give Nutrien a round of applause. Okay, I'll shut up now because we're running out of time.
Okay, so our next presentation is going to be done by our legal team, Waddell and Phillips. They're a law firm out of Toronto. And I will say that this law firm has been really engaged right from the beginning. I think we got them to work for the committee and the survivors, I believe, November, December. And they've been truly heavily engaged and really focused on trying to move this residential school issue forward. So, and I will say that this legal team have done more in the last 2 months than our other legal team in 17 years. So these guys are at the forefront in terms of what we're trying to do. So let's give Waddell and Phillips a nice warm welcome. I'll get a chair.
Okay, thank you. Oh, there we go.
So I want to first of all thank the steering committee for inviting us out to meet with all of you folks at this wonderful gathering, and thank you to the Métis Nation of Saskatchewan for their important role in bringing you all together and helping to retain us, to act on your behalf. We're really overwhelmed by the number of people here today. And before we start our presentation, there's something I'd like to do with your permission, which is take a video of all of you here
that we can show to the representatives of the government about who the people are that we're representing. So if you don't mind, if you could stand up and give a big wave so we can say, hey, government, these are the people that we need to have compensated. Can we do that? Thank you, everyone. Thank you. So, we are thrilled to be your new legal representatives. I'm Margaret Woodell. This is John Phillips. We're Woodell Phillips. And we are going to hopefully run through a PowerPoint and answer some questions about what's going on with the litigation. So, first of all, the Woodell Phillips team we're going to introduce you to, because there's more of us than just me and John. We'll give a little update on the case. We're going to talk about next steps. We're going to talk about the goals for this litigation. So, just a sec. There we are. The first person over way on the right you won't recognize, that's me pre-COVID. Then the next person is John Phillips, who's here with me. And the third person, some of you have met because she's been out and she's met with some survivors already, is our partner, Tina Yang, who is also heavily involved in this case and is really our person on the ground who's working to gather all of the information to prove your case in the negotiations that we have with the government. So what's going on with the case? Some of you will know that there was an action commenced 17-ish years ago by a law firm called Merchant Law Group, and nothing has happened with that litigation. It kind of stalled and didn't move forward. So the survivor group decided enough was enough and that it was time to move and find new counsel. And they found us, and we were more than happy to take on your claim against the governments. And have started a new action. We call it the Gardner action, and that's because Louis Gardner is the first of the named plaintiffs. There are 6. The other plaintiffs are 3 survivors, Margaret Aubuchon, Melvina Aubuchon, and Emile Janvier, and a couple of intergenerational survivors, Dwayne Favell and Donna Janvier. Could I have the plaintiffs stand up just so that you can say hi to everyone here who you're representing? Okay. So these are the 6 people who are what we call representative plaintiffs. Their names are on the statement of claim, and their job is to represent all of you in the litigation. They're the ones, along with the Survivors Committee, that are providing instructions to us about how to proceed with the litigation, and their job is to do what is best for all of you survivors. And they understand that role, and it's very important to them to be representing all of you to find a resolution to your claims as soon as possible and the best resolution possible. And they take that role seriously, so do we. The defendants in our case are Canada and Saskatchewan, the governments. We're not suing the churches, and we can explain that to you when we're in our breakout sessions about why that's not happening. Whoops. Let me go back. Okay, next. So what's going on? case update. And I'm going to have John take over this part of the case after I introduce you to our judge. This is Justice Bardai. He's a very recent appointment to the Saskatchewan Court of King's Bench. And Justice Bardai cares about this case too. Although he doesn't have a lot of experience with class actions, and he's obviously not Aboriginal, he understands about the importance of maintaining Aboriginal culture and identity, and he has spoken about this very strongly in the family law setting. So we have a lot of confidence in him, and he's making himself available to us to talk about moving the case forward in a very quick way. We've had experiences in other cases where the judges don't find time until months and months down the road from when you ask to meet with them. Justice Bardai was available to meet with us as early as last week, but not surprisingly, Merchant Law Group, who we needed to have at that meeting because of our intent to bring some court actions about his proceeding, wouldn't make themselves available. So we're going to have a meeting in the week of April 10th. And what we are going to be doing is setting a date in the court to bring what's called an application to ask the judge to make an order to stop the Merchant Law Group action. And we expect that that will be allowed because, well, everybody that we know of who is still living and can be found who was named as a plaintiff in the Merchant action has fired him. And they have retained our firm to proceed with the action, the new Gardner action instead. So we expect that there won't be any problem in having the Merchant action stayed. Now, why is that important? And we'll come back to this more in some detail as we go forward with our presentation. But the real reason and the most important reason is that until we kill the Merchant action, the Government of Canada and the Government of Saskatchewan have said that they can't negotiate with us until the other action is killed. So with that, I'm going to ask John to take over speaking for a minute and give you a little update about what we've been up to since the steering committee hired us at the end of last year.
So let me start with this. Our law firm is technically from Toronto. I am originally and still consider myself a citizen of Saskatchewan, born in Looseland. So please don't hold the Toronto thing against us. I have been involved, along with Mark, from 2005 until now in virtually every iteration of the residential school process. We acted for then National Chief Phil Fontaine in the Assembly of First Nations in the original round of negotiations of the Indian Residential School Settlement Agreement. That was focused, and I want to sort of give you a broad view of how this Ile-a-la-Crosse is going to fit into what's happened. The Indian Residential School Settlement Agreement was focused exclusively on the residential survivors of the residential schools. We were proud of the result that we got in that by the time it was done, but we very quickly after it was finished realized with members of the community that there had been groups that were excluded. Of the groups that were excluded, there were what were called the day scholars, who were the students who attended but didn't stay overnight at the identified residential schools. We also looked at the First Nations themselves and the communities and the losses that were occasioned there, because part of the targeting of the Indian residential school policy was not just on the children, but on the children's ability to affect the communities, to tear down the language and the culture, to break the connection to the land, all for the benefit of Canada. And so those were part of the excluded groups. Another group recognized that the day schools, the federal day schools, were also not included and did not have that moment of reconciliation. So following the Indian Residential School settlement agreement, I was retained, our firm was retained by two bands out of British Columbia, the Kamloops and Seychelles. And we started what was known as the Godfredson class action on behalf of the day scholars, and ultimately on behalf of over half of the First Nations in Canada in their own right as First Nations. We settled the day scholars case, so we included the excluded day scholars in 2021, and we just settled the band class action for the 325 bands that adopted in. It was just approved 2 weeks ago by the federal court. The McLean action on behalf of the federal day schools was settled, I believe, in 2019. And so if you look at where we are, we've taken the excluded day scholars, they're included. The bands that were excluded are included. The day students at the federal day schools are now included. What hasn't been included is you guys. And there was a lack of recognition back during the Indian Residential School settlement negotiations about the Métis Nation, about the Métis people. And what this case is about is recognizing your place in the Indian residential schools, the damage that was done to your communities, to your unique Michif communities and language and culture and connection to the land. And our job now for you, despite the 17 years of inactivity before, our job for you now is to move this into a negotiation phase as soon as we can. And you have the commitment of our firm to make sure that that happens and happens as quickly as possible to move Canada and Saskatchewan in that direction. As Marg just identified, the holdup right now is the Merchant Law Group. Canada, someone's going to ask us a question later on about why isn't Canada settling this case? Why is Saskatchewan settling this case? The problem for Saskatchewan and Canada as defendants is because you are represented by the Merchant Law Group right now, they cannot negotiate directly with the Métis Nation or with the steering committee directly. They have to negotiate through council. So our first job is to remove the Merchant Law Group and that action from the field so that we can negotiate directly with Canada and with Saskatchewan. Justice Bardai, who was on the screen earlier, as Marg said, has given us dates, very quick dates, so that we can get in and get a motion set down to remove that other action as a stumbling block towards settlement. It is our belief that once that is done, we will be able to sit at a table with Canada and with Saskatchewan and try to get a settlement in place. Canada has done this already. They've done this for the day scholars. They've done this for the residential scholars. They've done this for the day students. And there's nothing that should stand in the way of getting a resolution for your community, for your people that attended Ile-a-la-Crosse. So our job is to have this motion set down and then to get into negotiations. And as you all know, no one trusts Canada and no one trusts Saskatchewan to settle a case immediately. So our other commitment to you is that as this case unfolds, we are going to be going through the usual litigation process of collecting documents from every source that we can locate them and get them together so that we can see the history of the school and identify the survivors, deceased and alive, that attended and resided at the school. So that will continue apace. In other words, we're going to act as if this matter is going to go to trial. We're going to work as quickly as we can to push it towards a trial, but at the same time, work towards getting a negotiation in place with the government defendants to get a resolution. As part of the document production process, and maybe if you're okay with this, I'm going to address the issue of the churches for a moment, because neither the day student case, the McLean action, nor our case, the day scholar action in Godfredson, none of us named the churches. The churches are the worst defendant that we've had to deal with in this whole process. They were a major holdup in the Indian Residential School Settlement Agreement. And as you know, they didn't even follow through with the commitments that they made as a result of those settlements. So they're both a roadblock, and they don't assist in getting a resolution in terms of compensation and getting a reconciliation with the government entities. That doesn't exonerate them. And we're pursuing the church entities, or the church itself, to get their document production to assist in that process. And they have agreed to cooperate with us in that regard. So the church is on board at least to getting us documents. And I'm hoping someday that they will stand up as part of what happened with the papal apology, stand up and make a proper apology on behalf of the local church to your community and to the survivors of Ile-a-la-Crosse. Part of my problem with Mark's PowerPoint is my eyesight's terrible. I can't read it. So, okay. So that's why we haven't included the churches. In terms of where the litigation goes from here, again, it's going to be dictated in part by how reluctant or willing Canada is to come to the table and Saskatchewan is to come to the table. We're going to do what we can to get that moving quickly. And like I said, there's two tracks. There's a trial track that we're going to pursue as if this matter is going to trial. We're going to do that as quickly as we can, and we're going to try to get people to the table for settlement negotiations. I'm going to hand it back to Mark since I've run out of gas.
So what are we doing to move the case forward besides talking with Saskatchewan and Canada? We've been really busy. We've been collecting documents from all sorts of sources, from the Department of Education, from the federal government. As John said, we've been getting records from the church. In fact, the bishop directed the local church authorities to cooperate with us. So we've been having a really good experience with them to obtain whatever documents they have. We've got documents from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Métis Nation, of course, had collected documents, and we've been getting documents from them. What our ask is from you folks is that one of our big challenges in negotiating the settlement is going to be able to prove to Canada and Saskatchewan who the survivors are. And the records are incomplete. There are not nice, tidy records of who attended the school from year to year to year. So if you have any documents or pictures or school newsletters, anything that shows who was at the school at any time, if you're prepared to share those with us, that would be very, very helpful. And so that's our ask of you. If you've got anything that can help us identify who the survivors are, and you've got that information, if you can send it to us, then that would be helpful. The Métis Nation will help if you only have hard copies and don't have an easy way to get them to us. Or if you're computer savvy, then you can send them to us through our emails, which are up on the screen, or through our website. There's a Contact Us button. And that's a way to get a hold of us, to send documents to help the survivors prove that they were at the school. Why is that not working? Just a sec. So, as John said, our goal is to get the merchant action out of the way so we can move forward with negotiations, and we're going on with the litigation. The first step in the litigation is what's called certification. That's when the judge says, yes, this action is allowed to go ahead as a class proceeding. So we're going to be pressing ahead with that right away, even if we do start into negotiations with the government, because it has to be done. There has to be an order from the court that says that our 6 representatives can represent you and negotiate on all of your behalf. So that will be happening even if we go down a negotiation route at the same time. So we know that you have a lot of questions. There are a couple of things that are going to happen. We're going to be in one of the breakout rooms this afternoon and are happy to talk with anybody who has questions that haven't been answered by our presentation today. And we'll be in a breakout room tomorrow morning as well. And we're happy to talk to any of you and answer your questions in that somewhat smaller setting. But I thought what we'd do first is try and answer some of the big questions that you may have and explain about the litigation here. We're going to talk for about another 10 minutes and then open the floor for 15 minutes for some questions now, and we'll stay up here if there's more questions that people want to ask in the big forum while you're eating your lunch. So the first one, how does a class action work? We kind of touched on this already a little bit. A class action is just like any other litigation, except that there are a number of people called representative plaintiffs. They're the 6 that we identified who are going to be pushing the litigation forward for everyone here. The judge has to decide that it's okay. We know that that is going to be something that won't be an impediment here, that because there have been so many other actions that have been certified for residential school abuse that we have no concerns that the judge would deny this case going ahead as a class action. That will happen hopefully sometime as soon as we get the merchant action out of the way, then we can go ahead with that. The action, once it's certified, then is an action that's being brought on behalf of all of you. And that means that any result in the action will be binding on everybody that's included. Once the action is certified, if anybody says, you know what, this isn't for me and I don't want to be involved in the group litigation, I don't want to be involved, you have a chance to say, no, thank you, I don't want to be involved. So you can't be forced into being involved in the litigation if you don't want to. That's your decision, and you'll have an opportunity once it's certified to say, I'm in or I'm out. You can't be compelled to be involved. So what is this class action lawsuit about? That's sort of self-evident. What this is about is to provide money compensation to all of the survivors of Ile-a-la-Crosse residential school. It doesn't matter if you're Dene, if you're Métis, if you are a First Nations person. If you went to the school or you're a family member, you are included as the proposed class. So if you went to the school, you're in, unless you decide to be out. It is meant to provide compensation, just like in the other cases that have been settled where you have been passed over. We're saying you too, that you are also entitled to compensation. You're entitled to recognition for the harms that you experienced, the loss of your culture, the loss of your language, the traumas that you've all experienced of whatever level they are. And there will, of course, be different levels of compensation depending on the kinds of harms that each person suffered, just as there's been in the other settlements that have happened. That's what we can do. That is all that as lawyers and in a lawsuit that we can do. The only way to provide compensation in our legal system is through money, but we have these wonderful experiences like today that will hopefully help with your own healing and your own experiences. And I think I'm overwhelmed by all of you being here today. And I've got to say, I've never felt such a power and community as I feel here today. And I hope you're finding this to be a positive experience. Next question. So who's included? We've touched on that. You're all included unless you say, no, thank you, I don't want to be included. So why did we start this action? You've heard about this already. The Merchant Law Group started an action back in, I think, 2006. And so far, nothing's happened with it. And there was a point when the Survivors Committee said, enough is enough. We've lost trust in the Merchant Law Group, and we want some lawyers to represent us who are actually going to take this and our people seriously and move the case forward. And they found us, and we take your claims seriously, and we are moving them forward as fast as we can because this is really important for you, and we believe in your stories and your causes. What about the other residential school actions? You heard from John about that, and he explained to you that Ile-a-la-Crosse wasn't included because the technical reason was that Ile-a-la-Crosse was identified as a Métis school, not an Indian residential school. So it wasn't part of the list of schools that had been identified as Indian residential schools when the first litigation was being dealt with. It was labeled a Métis school, and so it wasn't captured for that reason. We now know since the Daniels case that was decided by the Supreme Court back in 2014 or so that Métis are Aboriginal people. You should not have been passed over to begin with, and we're fixing that now with this action. So do I need to do anything? Do you need to do anything to be part of this action? The answer is nope, you don't. As I said before, the class is proposed to include anybody that went to the school at any time. Doesn't matter who you were, so long as you are Aboriginal. So if there were white people there, the students of teachers and so on, or the children of teachers and so on, they're not included. This is an action for Aboriginal people. Do you have to do anything? No, you don't. You're automatically included once the action is certified, unless you say, no, thank you, I don't want to be involved. Super simple. Sorry? Oh, I thought I heard a question, but they're coming. Hey, do I have to pay for this? No, sirs and ma'ams. No, everybody else in the room. You do not have to pay for this. Nothing is required of you. We're very grateful that the Métis Nation of Saskatchewan is providing us with financial support, and they are paying our legal fees as we go ahead at a discounted rate. And then, assuming it's successful, we'll be asking for the governments of Saskatchewan and Canada to pay legal fees as well. But you will not be required to put your hands into your own pockets to pay for this litigation at all, ever. And that's something that is really important, that you should know that the Métis Nation is supporting you, and that we are never going to look to you to pay a second anything ever. So where are we at? As we said, we're just in the initial stages right now. Canada and Saskatchewan have been served with our claim. They know we're out there. We've talked to them, and they, at least the Canadian government has said that they're prepared to talk to us as soon as we get Merchant out of the way, so that we're the only lawyers that are acting on behalf of the litigation group. That's positive. We expect that Saskatchewan will come to the table as well, but remains to be seen. So some of you might know that there was what's called a memorandum of understanding. That was made back in July of 2019 between your steering committee and the Government of Canada. And in that memorandum of understanding, basically, the government said that were prepared to enter into what they called exploratory discussions about settlement, which was sort of preliminary steps towards a resolution. And they kind of fizzled out, those negotiations, for a number of reasons, part of which falls at the feet of the former lawyers who really didn't engage in the process. That memorandum's still in place, and like I said, once the merchant action is stopped, we'll continue to negotiate under its terms. So, John, I'd like you to talk a little bit about what can be expected about compensation at the end of the day, and what our ultimate goals are, having in mind that you just never know how it'll turn out.
So I would start by saying this: no matter what comes out of this for compensation, everyone in this room and every survivor of residential school knows it's not enough. It's never going to be enough. But what I've discovered is that just getting a matter resolved, and I'll come to what I think that is going to be on the table ultimately, but just getting a matter resolved and having that moment where there's a recognition by the government that they wronged you, that they harmed your language, your culture, your physical persons, that moment is one of the most healthy moments you're going to have in dealing with the whole experience of residential schools. When we settled the band class action, after the hearing of the settlement approval, we had a prayer session that was run by my adopted aunt from Seychelles, or from Kamloops. And she reminds me of the chairwoman that was up here before. She insisted that the judge attend, as well as the court staff and the Department of Justice lawyers that were in the room, along with about 12 First Nations chiefs that had attended the hearing. And we had this giant circle. And the DOJ was there, government representatives, chiefs, survivors, the judge, the court staff, and the lawyers. And putting aside what came out of that settlement, and it's a big settlement, but putting aside what came out of that, everyone in that room walked out feeling like there had actually been reconciliation. And for us, that's part of the goal in getting there. You're never going to be satisfied with the number. Putting a dollar sign on your language, culture, and the physical and sexual abuse can't be done. And the court, if it winds up in a trial, the court does a rough job to try to figure that out. Putting that aside for the moment, and I want to keep you focused, because this is such a positive room. That reconciliation that can come from just finishing this process will be healthy for everyone and allow you to start to move forward with even more positivity than's here in this room. In terms of what I think is on the table, Margaret and I have discussed this. The McLean settlement for the day students and the Indian Residential School settlement agreement for the residential scholars had basically four different components. The first was a common experience payment in the day students, which is probably the most analogous case to what we've got here. That payment was, I think, $10,000 for the first band. That is just for if you had attended the school and had any level of mistreatment, you got into that first bandwidth. After that, just like in the Indian Residential School Settlement Agreement and just like in the McLean Day students, there was then a system set up for individual assessments on a scale, depending on the nature, level, and scope of abuse and sort of the sustained damage. You would apply it a very simplified process, so to avoid re-traumatizing, and it would scale up. And I can't remember the upper bandwidth of what it may have been, around $200,000 at the most extreme end. But it would work in about 4 or 5 different bands for McLean and similarly for the Indian Residential Schools settlement. That's what I think will be on the table for the survivors, is a common experience payment and then a structure for determining the level of abuse and a scale of abuse, likely that will look at or near what is in the McLean case. Although in our view, we're going to be looking for more for reasons that I'm not going to say in public, but Margaret and I have discussed. There's also then the issue of the descendants, the intergenerational harm. And that is usually done, it was done by, in the day scholars case, the day students case, and the Indian residential school case, by creating a fund, a trust, that intergenerational survivors could then apply to get for various programs that were available for wellness, heritage, language, culture, etc. And so that was set up, and it looked very, if you have any familiarity with what happened with the Indian Residential School Settlement Agreement, there was a healing fund that was set up to do that. And there's funds that are now set up under the day scholars and day students, as well as the sort of similarly with the band class that's been settled recently. So that's for the descendants. What we're hoping to also obtain is for the estates. So those people who since 2006, or in our view, since May 31st, 2005, which is when the Indian Residential School Settlement Agreement was negotiated, or went back to, anyone who was alive on that day, May 31, 2005, but who has deceased since, their estate could make a claim for their loss as if they were a survivor. In other words, whatever that estate could qualify for, or the person could have qualified for, the estate would then apply for. And it would be available to basically for distribution through an estate process. We did this in the day scholar case by creating a simplified version of that, so that you don't have to go through probating an estate and having, if someone died intestate, or you have to work with the will. We're trying to avoid all of that. There's a structure in place. So this is all stuff that's been done before. There's a model for this. So that's for those who were alive on May 31st, 2005, but are deceased since. And it's really important in your case in particular, because even some of the named representative plaintiffs in the original merchant law group action have died. They didn't get an opportunity to have any opportunity for reconciliation or compensation. And that we're going to try to make up for in our negotiations with Canada. So that's for the estates of people alive at May 31, 2005, and deceased since. So that's basically the categories of loss: a common experience payment, payment structure for determining abuse, sexual, physical abuse, and scaled up damages for that, an estate claim structure, and then the claims for the descendant class. Is there anything I'm missing here? So I think we're way over time here. Do you want to Q&A?
Yes, absolutely. We are just getting to that. I just need to turn to, oh, there we go. Oh, darn. Oh. Can we get the last page back up? There we are. Okay, this is how to contact us. If you want to identify yourselves to us, we're not asking that you do, but it sure would help us if you could identify yourselves to us so that we have the best list possible of who the survivors are and who the intergenerational survivors are. We put website updates on our firm website, so you can check there from time to time and find out what's going on. We're always available to answer calls and emails as well. And now we're happy to take some questions, and like I said, we'll go for another few minutes. Then we're going to break while you grab some lunch, but we'll stay up here to answer more questions, and then we're going to be in a breakout room this afternoon to have questions and answers as well. So I think there's some mics set up around the room, and
yeah, there's one here.
Yeah. So
I think I'm loud enough for everybody.
Yeah. You want to go ahead?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. You just mentioned that was only for the Métis or First Nations. Again, it's happening. You're ostracizing some people that were in the convent with us, and their parents weren't teachers. These were people that were staying around the lake, and the mink ranchers and stuff like that. Their children were put in a convent with us, and now you're ostracizing, just like the government ostracized us, because we were Métis.
No.
And now it's happening again with these people that came into the meeting here. So
Okay,
I don't know, like you just said that, or him, or you said.
Yeah, it was me. No, absolutely. Anybody who is Aboriginal, which of course includes Métis.
I'm talking about the white children.
Okay, so right now the decision and the way the claim was framed only includes Aboriginal people,
Well,
not
who
white people.
framed
But
this?
I hear you, and that is something that we can take up if you think that it's
Yeah, because we are
important.
supposed to be in, a unit, a unity for all people. Let's not try to push this one away and this one. Let's all join together. That's how we could be strong as one. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, and we'll take that up with our people that are deciding about how the action should go ahead. That's an important point. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Well, just on that, you did state earlier that anyone, including white people that had attended, are covered. You did say that.
No, sir.
Well, that's what I heard.
The white people were not included. The claim as it's currently framed is for any Aboriginal person.
No, I'm talking about the compensation part. I
Yeah.
thought I heard you say that. But anyway,
Yeah.
maybe I heard wrong. I
Okay.
probably will be accused of hearing a lot of things.
Or we may
But
have said
anyway,
it wrong, but
but I think it's the right statement. Everybody's included, especially in the Indian residential school system. Anybody that went is included. It didn't matter what race you are.
Thank you.
In any event, my name is Clem Chartier. I've attended the Ile-a-Crosse boarding school for 10 years. And I'm really happy to see so many people here, and some people I haven't seen for 50 or more years. And, I thank the Métis Nation Saskatchewan for making this possible. I have 2 points I want to make. The first has to do with the merchant law action. And I did have an opportunity to read one of the, what do you call it? The form you have to fill out at the outset. And it did state that if he gets fired, or if people just continue using him, that they do have to pay, legal fees that were included. And I don't know if it also included the estate. So my question is, for those people that have fired Mr. Merchant, is someone going to pay for their legal fees if he does come forward? Or are you going to ask the judge to waive those legal fees? That's the first point. First question.
that is a really excellent question. So the people who fired Mr. Merchant acknowledged that if his action went ahead, that he might be entitled to legal fees. If there is an order that stays that action, that says that it can't go ahead, then that firm will not be entitled to any legal fees for that proceeding. And because Merchant's not part of the new Gardner action, they're not entitled to any legal fees for that proceeding. Now, that doesn't mean that Mr. Merchant isn't going to trot into court once there's a settlement or a trial judgment and say, hey, I'm entitled to be paid for the work that I did for 17 years. And he can try and convince the judge, whether it's Justice Bardai or a different judge, that he did something that's entitled to compensation. We, on behalf of you, the survivors, are going to say he's not entitled to any money.
Okay, well, you may not be aware, but his initial action was only against the federal government.
Yes.
And then he went to get the province at it, and they had to go through litigation for that. So I'm sure he incurred some costs. But in any event, I'm just wanting to make sure that those people that have fired or were part of that action as individuals are covered. That's all I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I understand that, and we absolutely understand that he's gonna ask for money, and we're gonna say that ultimately he's not entitled to to that because of, there's a lot of reasons, but
Okay,
we're
thank
going to
you.
say not.
Thank you. The second point is, and it comes back to the merchant, when we were meeting beginning in 2007, collectively, we decided that we would not support the merchant action. It was a conscious decision, and that we would pursue the political route, the negotiation route. And I know now the committee has decided, because of the province not wanting to come to the table, to take the legal action that they have. So, and that's fine. My recommendation is, and I'm not sure how this is being organized, but it seems we have so many people here today, tomorrow and the next day, that some kind of consensus or some kind of resolution or some kind of indication that, the former students are, supporting this action. I think that would help in moving this forward. Thank you.
You're welcome. I think that's an important point. And talking to the survivor committee is your best route for reaching that consensus. I encourage you to talk to them. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I'm William Case from Survivor, the Ile-a-Crosse boarding school. And I did attend when you did a press release a couple of months ago.
Yep.
And I indicated there that we need to look for support from the FSIN or our bands. And it seemed like that you did put a resolution in there, and they did get a letter of support of FSI, and thanks for that. But I'm asking all the survivors here that are First Nations, go back to the band and ask for a letter of support from their own bands. I've been asking for that for quite a while now, and hopefully that happens. But to me, this gathering don't mean very much because we have very limited participation in the process. Now, this committee has been around for 10 plus years. The same members, some have passed on and they've been replaced. To me, as a survivor, I don't have a say as to what goes. It makes me feel like I'm back in a boarding school where, okay, I'll do this for you. You go sit down. That doesn't jive with me. It's not good enough. We don't have no participation. Seems like all we're doing is waiting for compensation check. That's not fair. We have feelings. And we're angry. We're survivors. And then all of a sudden, you've been hired without our consent, without anything that I had to say. And we've asked the committee members to give us updates. We didn't. Very limited updates until just recently.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
Dwayne has given us updates.
Yeah.
I'm sure happy that's happening now, but it didn't happen before.
Yeah.
It seems like somebody was muzzling the committee members not to say anything. Now, is your law group going to be doing that? I hope not. We need updates and we need to get organized. I've been to several conferences where twice the size of this group, and we managed to go and select people that we want to lead us.
Okay. Well, absolutely.
Now, there's nothing in this gathering that's structured to have that. All we're doing is getting information from you guys, telling us what you're going to be doing, and we have no response.
Okay, so we're going to be meeting in the other rooms, and we're really happy to talk to you one-on-one and hear from
There
you.
should be a gathering here and see if we agree. And what about a registration process? You say we need names. Well, why don't you have a registration process? Give us some forms to fill out. We'll do it,
Yeah,
and we'll do it for you.
We do have the form on our, that we can get out to you, absolutely.
Okay, and the province, I know you're preparing to get the province involved. Good luck on that, though.
Well, we're talking to their lawyers, so, you know, they are engaging with us.
And another question, I wish Glenn would have been up there to answer this one. There's a talk of setting up a commission for our boarding school. Now, we want to have an update on that. We want some information. Who's on that committee?
Okay, I think.
Who's on that commission, and what are they? What is their work?
Yeah.
And that's all I'm going to say for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's really important information.
I just want to address just the last piece about participation. Our firm is just being retained. I don't know whether you all consent to us acting for you or not. We are responding to the instructions of the committee. All I can tell you is I don't know what happened in the past. Margaret doesn't know what happens in the past. All we can tell you is that right now, moving forward, you are going to be having updates constantly. You will have a website that will be updated to tell you whatever you want to look to see what the status of the case is. And in terms of participation, litigation only, especially with a class action, because there's so many people involved, works by having just a limited number of people that we work with to move the case forward, and it gets everybody else involved passively so that we're not getting instructions from 600 different people. If we want to get a resolution, we have to move it efficiently. So that's what the class action is designed to do. But your participation, and I want to go back to that last person's comments, your participation is this. Saskatchewan is reluctant to come to the table. There's no question. If you want to help individually, every one of you should be getting a hold of your local provincial politician and pound the table that they need to come to the table with us and get a moment of reconciliation, put their hands in their pockets and compensate. That's the role you could do that we cannot do. We can only work with whoever the government decides is going to negotiate across the table with us. But those people respond to instructions, and those instructions come from politicians. So if you want to participate, if you want to help in this, get a hold of your provincial politicians and tell them they have got to make a settlement happen, along with Canada and us.
Yeah, hello. My name is Perry Case. I'm from Ile-a-la-Crosse. I never attended residential school only because I was saved from getting picked up and taken there. And I'll tell the story I told a few people. Beautiful sunny day. We're out on the boat, my father and I and my older brother. And we're checking our nets, making a living, helping my dad with what we could as little boys. And he kept us close to him. For some reason, he must have known what was going on here and there in schools and whatnot. But a plane landed and came up to our boat. There was a conservation officer in there, RCMP officer, and a priest. And they're speaking to my dad.
Just a quick update here, ladies and gentlemen. If you want to ask a question, throw it in the comments. I can for sure go ask the question if you want. But if not, I'm going to put it back there, and we'll be cutting off here for a little bit and be back at 1 o'clock or after lunch. So, but if you have any questions and want me to go ask, throw it in the comments. Thank you.
I don't even think my dad listened to him. And then the police officer reached out for the boat to pull the boat towards the plane. And we used to have these seats in our wooden boats he could lift up and have storage in there. He pulls out his rifle. He says, "You guys are not taking my boys." But he was given an ultimatum that day that took me off the land where my spirit was, where I was growing up. But I think it was that fall we ended up moving into the town, or maybe I stayed with somebody, I can't remember. But they ended up pulling our little shack from across the lake on the ice into town. And that's when life kind of fell apart. The drinking started, all this kind of thing that happened to families when they move from a peaceful place into land where there's alcohol and peer pressure, whatever. So mother left, dad kept us, and he never gave up, and he raised us until his last day. And I stayed with him. I said, thank you for raising me. And today, I understand what he did for me. That day, he saved me from seeing all of you out here. It's hard on the soul, on the spirit. But my reason for coming up here is I was given the chair to come and speak for my table. Is what we're all missing and we're not understanding is we were pulled off the land. Let's not forget, we all have a place we can call home, whether you're in Buffalo Narrows, Dillon, Ile-a-Crosse, Patronac. There is a place you were pulled from. And my reason for standing up here is I want those places back, free of title, free of owing anybody money. Because I moved away from home 15 years. I'm paying 6 digits to find a place to go back to. And when it was right there, it ripped out of my feet when I was 5 years old. So I don't know if the committee wants to add land to the claim, because not all of us were in residential schools, but that's the trauma that everybody's feeling. But my feeling is back to that land. My spirit needs to go back to that land, and we need to connect again. And that's where I'm going to heal. And I think maybe others will heal the same way. Thank you.
Just as a quick response, the land issue, I'm sure is sort of being looked at by the Métis Nation itself. It's not part of the claims that we're dealing with. That whole issue, the key to making these things work is we keep the residential school attendance. That's one box. We can get that box moving quickly. We can get it done. You don't want to bundle too many things into the same box because it just slows it down to a crawl. So we want reconciliation on the residential school survivors. And there's going to be issues about land. There's going to be issues about unmarked graves. But those need to be kept in separate litigation boxes or separate issue boxes so they don't wind up acting as a giant sea anchor that slows everything to a crawl. That works only to the benefit of Saskatchewan and Canada. But I completely hear you. And you know, the problem with residential schools, sorry, I'm long-winded. Part of the problem with residential schools is what happened to you, even if you didn't attend. That was the intent of the Canadian Indian residential school policy. Break the connection through taking down the language and culture, break down the connection to the land. And it was an utter breach of Canada's fiduciary obligation to the Aboriginal peoples of this country.
Thank you. Thank you, John. So what we're going to do is we're going to take one more question, and then we'll go get our food. We'll get settled back in, and we'll continue with some more questions. I think the lawyers are going to be available for that. Plus, they're going to have their own session right after lunch if you're interested in asking more specific questions.
Okay. Thank you there, Mayor. I got 2 mics, so get ready. I'm going to talk for a long, long time. No, I'm just kidding. I'm TJ Roy, and I'm from the historic community of Ile-a-la-Crosse, Saskatchewan. Been a product of that residential school and that boarding school. I was listening to a couple of your notes. I was taking notes while you were doing the presentation. And I know there's been a lot of work that's been gone into this whole boarding school issue. At one time, it was a residential school issue. Now it's become a boarding school issue, day scholar issue. All kinds of different layers of legal jargon has played into the fold. I'm just wondering, with the previous lawyers that have worked on this case, and the amount of money that was spent by the organization, do you have access to that information that you can use to strengthen your case, your argument, whether it's in litigation or in compensation with the courts? And the second question before you answer that, sir, is the fact that a lot of people in this room do not understand English very well. And I think when you go, I'm glad that you're going to go out in your breakout rooms. You should appoint some kind of an interpreters, whether it's Scream, Chif, Dene, so they can understand about the law, because a lot of people don't know anything about law other than going to jail. That's far as it goes. But when you do your presentation, I ask of you and your partner there to be able to have somebody that can interpret that, and with Merchant, well, I think we're going to have to send him up the river with a paddle for a while, for now, because he's been a thorn on our side. But I'm glad that now that you're taking an aggressive approach in terms of trying to settle this issue. And I'm glad that money is not only the important thing, but there's a lot of badly sad statistics in our community with our young children, particularly with overdoses, suicide, addictions. Let's look at that aspect as well. Let's try to find monies to be able to hire our people to be able to address those kind of issues. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you. So going in reverse order, yes, there's going to be interpreters in the breakout room. Whoever those interpreters are need to tell Marg and I to slow down if we're going too fast, to make sure that everyone understands what's happening. With respect to what work was done by Mr. Merchant for the 17 years of inactivity that we can see, I don't think there's any value that has been obtained from that. And even as we sit here now, he's resisting turning over his materials to us, the documents that were even provided by his own clients. So we're not relying on anything coming out of that office. We're going to create our own and move forward as aggressively as we can.
Is it on it? Yes. Okay, let's have Grace, please, if you want to stand. And Nipawik, kaya mihanan. Marsichi tuyako gamitiak. Norman Florin disnekason yan miyechten uta ewitap mitega nos wasagapiak. Marsichi tuyak. Umagatas tamak. Istige goyuma kapetas tamakanos. Kiwisagitehanan etas tamak. Kiwisagitenehat. Kachiog tegna nekutagayajik leave you. Leave ye we sto epewichi wechik. Our elders kay tuyak Kaya shama likol kay techik lipsis afa. Muiwa kutayawak kinakateko nanik we sto nat parati nan kawako tuyak. Nistan miyechten ewitap mitek nistan likol dal kovangi tortan Saint Lazare Manitoba. Li sergik snamagonanik li per nistanan. Kaisha kakwatak taye kakyaw nistanan ge kwatak tanan kutan egiktemay kasho yak nistanan. Anos segwa utagani pawyak kamitso yak anos wituspam tonan. Ekwan makisiga wituspam toyak. Umagamit yak marsiga itonan bonjoy tanan. Chipihtigoy kwan makamitiak, chmostayak, chuichigoyak. Anos chimarsin bonjun de tawagiwi and we komak. Chpe we tapmigoyak, chuichigoyak, kwayeshinaga tuesh chigosiak. Egachik swasiak, magakwayesh, chinaga tuestamak, chipik squayak and magamostayak. Kishimarsigit tinan manitu libonju. Uta. Kama maopiak, ego shapas tamakuta, and akskatuyaki tamantu. I ask our Creator, our God, to bless this food, this nourishment of life, and those hands that prepared this food. And we eat this food together in fellowship, and give us this strength as we move forward. This
beautiful day of coming together. I thank God that I was asked to do this blessing, and it's a great honor. So let's continue the hard work. Let's move forward for our children and our grandchildren, our future. I'm not the future as an elder. I'm the past, but I'm the future in our young children. So thank you. Merci. How?
Okay, so we'll get our lunch and then we'll gather back in the room and we'll continue with some question and answers. And thank you very much to our Elder Norman Fleury for grace. I also want to introduce a little bit of entertainment as we eat. J.J. LaValle, who's a Métis musician. I think he's originally from Manitoba. So he's going to provide us with a little bit of entertainment. So let's give him a nice warm welcome.
Your voice here.
So how's it going, Julius? Were you living in the city here? Around you? Okay, awesome, yeah.
That I see here, I spent time in a residential school with.
Yeah, yeah.
And I just
Testing.
to say,
Testing.
to lead them, eh?
Yeah, yeah.
Once we started talking, that was it. We talked.
Testing. 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 What is going on here? Testing. 1, 2. Testing.
Yeah.
Testing. Testing. 1, 2. Already. Not sure what was going on there, but ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Doon zinig a lunch hour ho'ala. We're actually going to be cutting off, I do believe, or we'll keep the stream on. Or actually, I'm going to cut it off and then I'm going to come back on. So after 1 o'clock, then I'll interview it as clear. So I got a few people lined up. Richard Desjardins, Danny Montgrand, Rennie Grutry, and probably Julius Park at Dunzinige afternoon, then Halias Tiaza. And then later on in the day, I'm not sure what time, 2 to 3 probably, you're going to have the Cree. Okay, but sometime here this afternoon, you're going to have Robert Marasti that is going to take over in the Cree language, Cree Michif language, and he's going to have some people lined up for interviews, possibly. Okay, 2 people there. So make sure you share the live feed here, ladies and gentlemen. You know, it's always good to include everyone. I know this is on the Deneyati podcast page, but these type of gatherings here, you know, everybody is welcome. Nakri Dene Michif. It's all about being included, you know, which is what the Ile-a-Crosse residential school survivors are fighting for. Yeah, that seems to be the main purpose of the lawsuit here, you know, to be included and not be left out in the whole process of being identified as a residential school. So, you know, come on back here. I'm gonna cut off the feed here. Masi Choner Hosia, and probably just after lunch here, 1 o'clock, we'll be back on. So, Masicho.